Nobody warns you that the strangest part of ancient holy stories is the casual way they arrive. One minute you think the night is winding down, and the next, somebody is unrolling a crackly extra scroll like, "Oh yes, now for the giants and the badly behaved angels." You're sitting there with dust on your ankles, olive oil smoke in your nose, and everyone around you acting like this is a perfectly normal bedtime activity. It is deeply comforting and completely unhinged. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the lost stories that lingered around the edges of the Bible, the ones told after the familiar names had already passed through the room. We're going to spend one long, dusty night on woven mats while extra scrolls are unrolled, and somebody by lamplight starts talking about impossible calendars, giant footsteps, troublesome heavenly beings, and family histories that somehow got even more dramatic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in an ancient hill country house long after sunset. The good news? There's still room for you by the wall. The bad news? The room already smells like warm bodies, old wool, lamp smoke, and a goat who absolutely should not be this close to dinner conversation. You shift on a woven mat that feels like it was made by somebody who hated hips. The reeds poke through the cloth. Your ankle has gone numb, your lower back is filing a complaint, and there is dust everywhere. Not poetic dust, working dust. Dust in the fibers of your robe, dust in the corners of your mouth, dust lifting every time somebody moves, then settling into the olive oil. Haze, like the whole room has been lightly breaded. The house is one square room and several bad ideas. The walls are mud brick, cool in spots and crumbly in others. A shelf holds bowls, a cracked jug, and some flatbread under a cloth that is losing its battle against flies. The lamp flame wobbles in a little clay dish near the center of the room. It burns olive oil with the confidence of something far more pleasant than it is. The smoke crawls upward, then just sort of gives up and hangs there, so now everyone gets to marinate in it together. Cozy. Around you, people settle in after the ordinary stories have already been told. Abraham has done his rounds. Moses has had his moment. David has probably shouted at someone. You were expecting the ancient equivalent of good night, everybody go chew a fennel seed and sleep. Instead, an older man near the lamp clears his throat and reaches for another scroll. Not the polished one, not the familiar one. This one comes from a leather wrapping that has seen things. The outer tie is frayed. The parchment inside looks dry enough to snap if anyone unfolds it with too much enthusiasm. It gives off that warm, papery smell of dust, skin oil and age, like the world's holiest attic. He handles it carefully, but not reverently in the museum sense, more in the family sense. More in the don't put your cup on that sense. You glance around, expecting at least one person to react. Nobody does. A woman adjusts a sleeping child on her lap. Someone tears off a piece of bread. A teenager scratches his neck and tries to look interested without looking awake. This, apparently, is what happens here. The regular stories end, and then out come the bonus features. The old man wets his fingers, separates the edge of the roll, and unspools a length across his knees. The parchment makes that dry whispering sound, like leaves rubbing together. Every head tilts toward the lamp. Then, with the same tone, somebody might use to announce lentils. He begins with the strange ones. Tonight, you learn that ancient people did not sit around saying, "Well, that was enough sacred material for one evening." Absolutely not. They kept going. They had follow-up questions, side stories, expansions, heavenly detours, giant-related emergencies. Their spiritual life had the energy of people opening one more family group chat and making everything worse. You sit up a little straighter. The room tightens around the voice. Outside, the night presses against the doorway. Somewhere beyond the wall, an animal snorts in its sleep. A dog barks once, sharply, then decides whatever it was can be someone else's problem. Inside, the storyteller mentions a name you know. Good, safe, familiar. Then he keeps talking, and suddenly that familiar name has wandered into a story you have absolutely never heard. There are angels doing far too much. There are dates and divisions and generations stacked like storage jars. There are beings so enormous that the ground itself sounds inconvenienced, and nobody blinks. That is the part that gets you. No dramatic pause. No, you're not going to believe this. No theatrical drumroll before the giants. The delivery is wonderfully matter-of-fact, as if every household has one uncle who occasionally mentions that a rebellious heavenly watcher taught people things they definitely should not have learned. You're trying to keep your face normal. The people around you are doing excellent work in the field of ancient composure. A child, half asleep, lifts his head when the story gets to the huge beings. Of course he does. Every child in every century hears giant and immediately becomes available. His mother pats his shoulder without taking her eyes off the reader. The lamp pops softly. Someone shifts beside you, and the wool of his cloak brushes your arm. It smells like lanolin, sweat, cold air, and weeks of lived experience. Your knees are stiff. Your eyes sting from smoke. Your stomach is pleasantly heavy with bread, and not quite pleasantly aware of onions. This should feel solemn. Instead, it feels domestic. That is what makes it so strange. The lost stories do not arrive on marble pedestals. They show up in rooms like this, with somebody's cousin snoring in the corner and somebody else trying to keep the lamp from dying. They come with crumbs on the floor, patched sleeves, and tired feet. They travel in memory, in muttering voices, in rolled skins tucked away after the famous stories are done. The old man pauses to adjust the scroll, and everybody leans in, because if that lamp goes out, congratulations, your evening becomes listening to darkness and goat breathing. The flame recovers. So does the room. Now the tale grows bigger. You hear of calendars so exact, they make your modern phone planner look lazy. Time is being counted with an intensity that suggests heaven employs administrators. You hear of dreams, judgments, strange journeys upward, strange punishments downward, and families somehow becoming even more complicated than the versions you already survived. It's magnificent. It's dusty. It's slightly alarming. And because you are here on the mat, in the smoke, with your toes cold and your face warm from the lamp, it doesn't feel like extra material. It feels like what nights are for. One story opens into another. One name pulls a second name behind it. The edges of the known world keep peeling back. The scroll crackles. The voice goes on. Outside, the dark hills keep their own counsel. And in this cramped room, breathing oil smoke and old dust, You realize the night is not ending anytime soon. Good. There are still more scrolls by the wall, and somebody with astonishing calm is just getting started. The oil lamp sputters, the scribe licks a thumb, and now the scroll gets organized in a way that would make even your most controlling relative blush. You were ready for mystery, maybe a giant, a questionable angel, some ancient nightmare with bad boundaries. Instead, you get a calendar, not a little wall calendar with a goat doodled on the feast days. A complete heavenly scheduling system dropped into the room with the confidence of somebody laying down house rules. Time, it turns out, is not just passing. Time has been sliced, counted, labeled, bundled, and filed away like dried figs in storage baskets. You can feel the room accept this immediately. Of course, history has compartments. Of course, the years line up in clean, sacred units. Of course, somebody in heaven has apparently been keeping records since the beginning, because nothing says divine majesty like celestial administration. You shift on the mat. The reeds complain. Your knees complain louder. Somewhere near the door, a-eyed child has already gone limp with sleep, face shiny with warmth and dust. But the old man by the lamp has hit his stride now, and the whole room is leaning into this strange, brisk vision of reality where every generation arrives on schedule, and every holy day has already been circled in red by angels. And now you are in it. Morning comes hard in this world. The dark is barely thinning when someone is already awake, feeding embers, kneading dough, muttering the count of days under their breath. You sit up in a house that smells of stale smoke, damp wool, yesterday's lentils, and animal breath pushing through the lower level. There is no leisurely start. Time here is not a flowing river. Time is a supervisor with a wax tablet. You rub sleep from your eyes and look out through the doorway. The sky is pale and cold, the kind of hard blue that makes every hill look honest and every chore feel unavoidable. A rooster starts up like a badly maintained trumpet. Another answers from farther. Off. Somewhere, a donkey makes the noise of a soul personally betrayed by dawn. The woman at the hearth is already flattening rounds of dough. Her hands move with the speed of somebody who has done this 10,000 times. Flour dust clings to her wrists. The dough smells sour and grainy, barley heavy, coarse enough that chewing it later will feel less like breakfast and more like settling a disagreement with a brick. She slaps one round onto hot stone, flips another, and keeps count of something while she works. Not loaves, days. That is the feeling in this world. Even while bread puffs and blackens, somebody is counting. The old stories you know are still here. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the names marching past in their usual sandals. But everything has been tightened, measured, given a ledger line. It's like walking into a familiar family kitchen and discovering one of your relatives has reorganized the whole pantry by cosmic significance. Nothing just happens. A child is born on a date that matters. A covenant arrives in a set pattern. A feast does not merely occur because people feel festive. Absolutely not. It is fixed, chosen, registered above. The weeks roll by in ordered clusters, and every cluster carries weight. Miss the rhythm, and you don't just feel forgetful. You feel offbeat with the machinery of heaven. That is a deeply stressful way to make lunch. You step outside into the yard. Dust crunches under your sandals. The morning still carries last night's chill, but the sun is already climbing with rude intent. Chickens scratch near a broken pot. a tethered goat watches you with the expression of a tax auditor. Beyond the low stone wall, fields spread in uneven patches, green where they can manage it, brown where they can't. A boy is carrying water from the cistern, one jar balanced against his hip. He is counting softly, not singing, counting. He knows how many days since the last Sabbath. He knows how many days until the next feast. He knows which month they are in, because in this world, the year is not some vague seasonal blur. It is arranged with the precision of a temple storeroom. You would like to be the kind of person who casually remembers all this. You are not. You can barely remember where you put your sandals, and now heaven wants you to track sacred weeks, jubilees, appointed times, and the proper order of life from creation onward. It's the spiritual version of finding out your entire extended family has been using a shared spreadsheet, and you are the only one who never got the message. The scroll keeps going. Now the world opens wider, and you realize this tidy system is not just for humans trying to avoid embarrassing themselves at feast time. The angels are in on it too. Of course they are. Heaven, apparently, is full of beings who do not miss deadlines. You can see them in your mind as the story rolls on. Not chubby little cloud ornaments, not decorative winged infants with the upper body strength of a dumpling. These are serious beings, attending, recording, relaying, dividing times and seasons like royal officials who have never once misplaced a document. You feel an immediate and unreasonable desire to apologize to them for your whole life. The day grows hotter. By mid-morning, the yard smells like baking earth, dung, wool, and grain drying in baskets. Flies have appeared with their usual commitment to making everything worse. Women spread figs on mats. Men check fences and look at the sky the way farmers always do, like it owes them something but won't listen. Children run errands, trip over each other, get yelled at, recover instantly. And through all of it, the count continues. 7 days, then another 7, then another. Sabbaths landing with regular force like hammer blows. Every 7th day, the work stops, or tries to. Animals still need feeding. Fires still need managing. Babies still produce emergencies with no respect for holiness whatsoever. But the day is marked, set apart. It comes around with such rhythm that you can feel it in your bones. 1 day in 7, the whole household shifts. No ploughing, no ordinary labor, no pretending this is like the other days. The bread was made ready before, the lamps are prepared. The best cloak gets brushed off and draped over shoulders still carrying 6 days of sweat. The air changes. Even the arguments lower their voice a little. You sit in the hush of it and realize something unnerving. In this world, rest is not a suggestion. It is scheduled into the architecture of reality. That sounds lovely, until you remember you are the kind of person who would absolutely lose track around day 4 and accidentally start reorganizing grain jars on the Sabbath. The old man's voice folds Abraham into this ordered universe with almost comic efficiency. Abraham isn't just wandering around under stars having dramatic faith moments. No, now he seems to move through life with heaven's calendar tucked somewhere in his sleeve. Feast days matter. Covenants are dated. Sacred memory has edges. You watch him in your mind. There he is, dusty from travel, beard full of weather, standing outside a tent while sheep smell terrible behind him and the sun cooks the whole landscape. A servant is tending embers. Someone is grinding flour. Someone else is skinning a goat. And Abraham, father of nations, is somehow also involved in the ancient equivalent of making sure the household doesn't miss the holy appointment. Majesty and logistics. That is the flavor here. Sarah is no vague background presence either. You can almost hear her directing the domestic weather of the camp. Dough rising under cloth, curds cooling in bowls, water rationed, servants moving in, practiced loops. The tent smells of wool, yeast, old milk, and that dry desert dust that gets into your teeth and stays there like a grudge. Outside, men discuss flocks and roots. Inside, time is being kept with bread. That is one of the strangest beauties of this world. The schedule is cosmic, but it lands in kitchens. Heaven measures ages, and you still have to flip flatbread before it burns. Angels may be accounting for jubilees overhead, but down here someone is scraping a pot with a shard of broken pottery and trying to remember whether the lentils soaked long enough. The sacred calendar does not float above daily life like a nice idea. It gets flour on it. Noah appears, and even he cannot simply build a giant boat and leave it at that. The flood belongs to a sequence. The months matter, the days matter, the waiting matters. Water rises on schedule. Rest comes on schedule. Emergence happens in measured time. It's the end of the world, yes, but apparently still subject to paperwork. You picture the ark from inside, not the cute nursery version with smiling giraffes and a tasteful rainbow. No, you are in a vast wooden box crammed with wet hay, manure, panic, feathers, and enough animal breath to melt your eyebrows. The floor is slick. The air is ammoniac and intimate. Everything squeaks, stomps, grunts, drips, scratches, and smells like a traveling barn got trapped inside a damp cupboard. And still, in the middle of all that chaos, somebody is counting days. That is the energy of jubilees in a sentence. The world may be drowning. The raven may be out there doing raven things. The goats may be treating your shins as personal enemies. But heaven has not lost track of the calendar. Not for 1 minute. You almost have to admire the commitment. The story moves down through generations, and every life feels fitted into a bigger frame. Sons are born. Names are given. Years collect. Death arrives. Another generation rises. It should feel dry, all this ordering. It should feel like listening to a tax record read aloud by a man with no eyebrows. But in this room, by this lamp, it doesn't. It feels like somebody trying very hard to insist that history is not random. That is what begins to settle over you. The births are messy, the meals are ordinary, the tents leak, sheep get sick, people lie, wander, age, ache, and bury their dead in rocky ground that never gets easier to dig. But above all of that, the days are being held together, counted, remembered, not one of them drifting loose into meaninglessness. You can feel why this would matter to tired people. A woman in the room beside you shifts her sleeping child from one shoulder to the other. The child's hair smells like dust and smoke and warm skin. The storyteller pauses for a sip of water. The parchment crackles. Outside, the wind drags against the wall. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. The festivals. Because once heaven starts organizing time, human beings are expected to keep up. There are appointed days, feast days, remembrance days, harvest days, covenant days, days for eating, days for stopping, days for bringing what you have and acknowledging that the year does not belong entirely to you. You are suddenly aware that ancient holiness involves a shocking amount of calendar management. Take a feast day in this world. You do not simply wake up and say, "I feel festive." Absolutely not. Preparations begin earlier. Grain is set aside. Oil is measured. Animals are inspected. Garments are shaken free of dust, or at least the worst of it. Family members are counted, because if you are feeding a household plus whatever relatives have drifted in, that takes planning and patience and a willingness to cut meat while somebody's aunt critiques your knife technique. The whole place smells different on those days. Roasting meat, fresh bread, sweet wine, smoke from extra fires, crushed herbs underfoot, sweat under cleaner than usual tunics, children scrubbed just enough to be shiny for 8 minutes before they go roll in dirt again. The household buzzes, bowls are filled, hands are washed, blessing and appetite arrive together, and underneath the joy is pressure, because this matters. Not in the casual, we should really try to make it this year sense. More in the structure of time itself is staring at you sense. The feast comes when it comes. The Sabbath lands when it lands. The year turns in its proper order, whether your roof is patched, or your goat is birthing triplets, or your cousin has shown up with opinions and no useful skills. Heaven keeps its appointments. You had better do your best. The scroll gives you patriarch after patriarch, moving through an ordered world. Jacob's house, already a full theatrical event on a normal day, now feels even more regulated. Sons, wives, servants, flocks, tents, food stores, grievances, all of it rattling along under a sky that never forgets what day it is. You can practically walk through the camp. There are woven goat hair tents breathing heat by day and cold by night. Ropes creak. Sand gets into everything. Wool cloaks hang from pegs smelling of lanolin and travel. Pots blacken over fires. A skin of sour wine gets passed around. A child cries because another child stole a date. 2 brothers are pretending not to fight while very obviously fighting. And somewhere in the middle of this traveling family circus, the sacred count goes on. Jacob himself feels less like a vague ancestor now, and more like a man who cannot ever fully relax. How could he? Every household under his care is a moving mountain of people, tempers, livestock, and obligations. Sheep need sorting. Wells need locating. Sons need watching, because leaving them alone for 10 minutes is like storing fireworks near a kiln. Yet the days still come marked. Sabbaths still return. Feast times still approach. The animals do not care. That may be the funniest part. A sheep has never once looked at a holy calendar and adjusted itself accordingly. Goats remain spiritually committed to nonsense. Cows will absolutely choose the sacred day to break a fence, get sick, or stand in the exact wrong place while everyone is trying to carry water. You are out there in the yard with a stick, trying to direct creatures whose eyes contain no respect at all, while inside the household somebody is preparing for the proper observance of a holy time established from above. It is deeply relatable. The order of this world does not remove inconvenience. It drapes meaning over it. By afternoon, the heat presses down like a heavy hand. Bread cools on cloths. Jars are sealed with wax and string. A woman combs burrs from wool with the fixed expression of somebody who has seen too much. Men return from the fields with dust caked up their calves. The smell of crushed grass mixes with sweat, leather, and animals who have absolutely stepped in things. The sun lowers, shadows stretch, and now the counting gets louder in your mind, because evening means another day complete, another square quietly marked in the invisible ledger, lamps are trimmed. A child recites what he remembers and gets corrected. An old man names months, years, festivals. Someone mutters over a mistake, starts again, gets it right. You realize this whole way of life depends on memory being carried in bodies, mouths, kitchens, and courtyards. Nobody gets to shrug and say, "I'm just not really a calendar person." In Jubilees, that excuse would die in the doorway. Moses enters the scene too, but differently than you're used to. Not just as the leader up a mountain in thunder and fear. Now he is also receiving the ordered shape of everything, as though the curtain has been pulled back and behind history there are shelves, labels, divisions, appointed spans. Heaven, astonishingly, has an administrative side. You climb the mountain with him in your imagination. The air grows thinner. Rocks cut through your sandals. Wind tugs at your robe. Below, the camp sprawls in its usual combination of humanity and inconvenience. Smoke rising from cook fires, children underfoot, animals tied near tents, men pretending confidence, women doing actual work. The smell from up here is cleaner, but not entirely. Thousands of people in one place have a presence. On the mountain, though, the perspective changes. You are made to feel that all the scrambling below has already been fitted into measured time, not controlled in the way of puppets, more like known, numbered, held in sequence. The Exodus, the wilderness, the law, the feast days, the weeks and years, all of it set into a structure older than the campfires and stronger than panic. That can be comforting. It can also make you feel spectacularly underprepared. Because once you know heaven cares about the schedule, forgetting becomes more embarrassing. You forgot a birthday once and felt bad. Fine. But this is the calendar of creation itself. This is missing the cosmic staff meeting because you were distracted by a donkey with stomach problems. The room around you gives a little murmur as the scroll touches law and observance. People here know what it is to count toward a sacred day. They know the effort of preparing before sunset. They know the tiny domestic dramas of holy timing. The grain wasn't ground early enough. The lamp oil is low. The child is sick. Your sandal strap breaks at the exact wrong moment. The bread scorches. Your brother is late. Your neighbor's rooster acts like time belongs to him personally. Still the Sabbath comes. Still the feast comes. Still the year turns. That's what gives this ordered world its force. It refuses to wait for you to be ready. So you learn to live toward it. You see a household doing just that. Women up before dawn. Water drawn while the air is still cold enough to sting your teeth. Flour sifted through fingers rough with work. Dough kneaded on a low board dusted with meal. Sheep milk strained through cloth. Oil checked in the lamp. Dates counted into bowls for guests. A boy sent to fetch wood returns with half the wood and several excuses. Nobody has time for excuses. Sacred time is approaching. The sounds pile up around you. Stone grinding grain. Fire snapping under clay. A goat headbutting a basket because it has no moral center. Babies fussing. Men outside discussing weather as if volume will influence it. Someone reciting a line too fast. Someone older making them start over. The whole house is a machine built of people, smoke, and fatigue. And over all of it hangs this strange confidence. The times were marked long before you fumbled the dough. That idea settles into the bones of the story. The year is not made holy because people remembered to celebrate. People celebrate because the year was already holy. The Sabbath is not sacred because humans agreed to rest. Humans rest because the day arrived carrying holiness with it. You can almost feel the weeks stepping past, each one wearing a little heavenly seal. Even the land gets pulled into the schedule. Fields are not just fields. They too belong to rhythms. Sowing, waiting, harvesting, leaving margins, counting cycles of years. Soil under your nails, cracks in your heels, sweat running down your back, and somehow all of it joined to a larger pattern that does not care about your preference for flexibility. You walk the edge of a field at dusk. Barley heads whisper in a dry wind. Dust clings to your ankles. The air smells of straw, warm earth, and the faint sourness of trampled stalks. Insects whine. Far off, someone is calling animals home. The sky is enormous and pitiless and beautiful in the harsh way deserts are beautiful, all open blaze and no softness. And standing there, you feel it. The weeks are moving whether you pay attention or not. That is either soothing or terrifying, depending on your personality. For some people, this ordered universe must have felt like shelter, exile, hardship, enemies, hunger, grief. All of it could shake you. But the appointed times remained, morning and evening, Sabbath after labor, feast after waiting, Jubilee after long accumulation. Time itself was not broken beyond repair. It still answered upward. For other people, maybe including you, this sounds exhausting. You're trying so hard. Your tunic is sticking to your back. Your hands smell like onions, sheep, and flour paste. You have ash on one cheek and no idea how it got there. There are weeds in the field, mildew on the stored grain, and a family dispute developing near the water jars. And now the universe would also like you to maintain precision. Fantastic. But the more you stay in this scroll, the more the order starts to feel less like nagging and more like mercy. Because chaos is cheap. Every household already has that for free. The goat escapes, the jar cracks, the child gets feverish, rain fails, rain arrives all at once and turns the yard into a brown soup of mud, dung, and regrets. Brothers betray brothers. Fathers age, mothers bury children. Nations rise making promises and leave behind ash. Human beings do disorder naturally, with flair. So in comes this stubborn claim. The days still belong to God. That is almost defiant. Not even the wildness of history gets to erase the count. The world may feel like a badly supervised market day, all noise and elbows and spilled grain, but underneath it, a structure remains. Weeks, Sabbaths, months, years, jubilees, memory with bones in it. By now, the lamp in the room has burned lower. The flame is smaller, steadier. Shadows gather in the corners where sleeping forms have slumped against walls and bundles. Somebody nearby smells strongly of sheep and fermented drink. Someone else has been chewing fennel or anise, and the sweet sharp scent cuts briefly through the wool and smoke atmosphere. The old man keeps reading. Names pass, numbers pass, appointed times return again and again, not as decoration, but as the ribs of the world. You begin to understand why this scroll would grip people. It takes the old sprawling stories and cinches them tight, as if to say, no, this mattered on Tuesday. This happened in the 3rd month. This feast belongs here. This covenant is not drifting. Put it in its place. It is theology by way of storage baskets. Everything labeled, everything shelved, and yet not lifeless. Because when you zoom in close enough, every sacred division still lands on human skin. The 8th day means a crying infant and anxious parents. The Sabbath means a mother finally sitting down with sore feet. The feast means flour under fingernails and smoke in your hair. The counted years mean wrinkles deepening around a shepherd's eyes while he leans on a staff and watches boys become men. Order does not remove flesh. It keeps meeting flesh in the doorway. The section of the scroll closes around Sinai and the shape of sacred life, and you can feel the whole room breathing with it. This is a world where heaven remembers dates better than people do. A world where angels are apparently the least fun but most dependable administrators imaginable. A world where the patriarchs move through history like men with hidden appointment books. A world where your bread can burn while eternity stays perfectly on schedule. You almost want to laugh. Not because it's silly, because it is so intensely, gloriously committed. The universe, in this telling, is not winging it. Not once. Every week arrives like it was sent. Every feast stands where it was placed. Every generation steps into time already measured from above. And you, poor creature on a reed mat with dust in your hem, are trying to keep up. Outside, the night has deepened again. Whatever stars are above the roof, they too are probably where they're supposed to be, punctual as ever. Inside, the lamp draws a last amber line along the parchment. The scribe's finger holds the place. The room is quieter now, but not empty. More like full in a different way. Full of counted days. Full of the strange comfort that someone, somewhere beyond the smoke and sore backs and half-baked bread, has not lost track. Not of the years. Not of the feasts. Not of the long waiting between one promise and the next. The scroll curls slightly at the edge, wanting to roll itself back up. But not yet. There are more stories by the lamp, more dust in the air, more names about to grow extra scenes and worse tempers. And somewhere beyond this severe, well-managed universe of sacred schedules, another old book is already clearing its throat. But the night is not getting calmer. Someone clears his throat, and now the old names come back larger, dustier, and somehow even more dramatic. You feel it before you understand it. The room shifts. Jubilees had the energy of a heavenly clerk with a perfect filing system and no patience for your excuses. This new scroll arrives like a cousin kicking open the courtyard gate to announce a fight, a funeral, and 3 marriages all before lunch. The names are familiar. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses. The whole old family line is still here, still wearing sandals, still making choices that will inconvenience generations. But now they have extra scenes, extra speeches, extra swagger. Everything is louder. Every argument gets another turn around the yard. Every battle kicks up enough dust to coat your tongue. You sit up a little. That woven mat has stopped pretending to be comfortable hours ago. Your hip is numb. Your knees have developed private grievances. The lamp smoke has worked itself into your hair and clothes so thoroughly that by morning you will smell like burnt olives and old wool. But now, the room has that alert feeling people get when a storyteller starts naming heroes in the tone usually reserved for incoming weather. And now you are in it. You are standing in a camp at dawn, and it is already too busy. Not pleasantly busy. Not cheerful, purposeful activity with birdsong and a fresh breeze and a woman humming while she bakes. No. This is ancient camp busy. Men shouting for tack. Boys chasing loose animals. Women carrying jars with the expression of people who will absolutely not carry your emotional burden too. Somewhere, a donkey is screaming, like it just read your private correspondence out loud. The ground is hard-packed dirt streaked with hoof marks, sandal prints, ashes, and whatever leaked from the animal pens overnight. You smell sheep, sweat, leather, stale milk, and dung warming under the first sun. You try not to breathe too deeply. It does not help. This world of Jasher likes its people in motion. Somebody is always arriving, leaving, mourning, threatening, marrying, or marching out to solve a problem with entirely too much confidence and a spear. Genealogy matters here, yes, very much. Fathers and sons and brothers and cousins get named with the seriousness of property boundaries. But vendetta matters too, and once those two things start holding hands, the whole neighborhood becomes one long family reunion with knives. You hear the line of descent being recited, and each name lands like a tent peg hammered into dry ground. Son of this man, brother of that one, descended from the other one with the impressive beard and the terrible judgment. Nobody is just a guy. Every person drags a whole caravan of relatives behind him, dead and living, honorable and embarrassing. You know that feeling when somebody says, "Oh, you're from that family," and suddenly the air gets weird. This scroll lives there. A household meal in this world is never just a household meal. Bread is passed, stew is ladled, children wipe noses on the wrong sleeves. Somebody tears off a piece of roasted meat too early. Somebody else gets more than their fair share of curds. An uncle says one thing too sharply. A brother stares too long. A father pretends not to notice because he is tired and would like one quiet evening before death. He will not get it. Nobody here gets it. The first stories swell with that old rawness from the beginning. Adam's house is not a serene painting with tasteful lighting. It is a family trying to survive outside Eden with dirt under their nails and grief already waiting by the door. The ground is stubborn. Your back hurts. Food takes work now. Ugly work, repetitive work. Work that leaves your hands blistered and your temper thin. You hoe at the earth while the sun beats your neck. The soil smells dry and mineral, then suddenly damp and rich where the blade bites deeper. Sweat runs into your beard or down your collar. Gnats hover near your face with the persistence of terrible thoughts. Nearby, someone is gathering brush for the fire. Someone else is muttering about seed. A child is crying because children have discovered that if they do it long enough, eventually somebody with cracked hands will pick them up. And hanging over all of it is the memory of paradise. That does not help. It is like spending the rest of your life after one perfect vacation, except instead of postcards you have thorns, labor pains, and a family line that goes bad immediately. Cain and Abel are not abstract symbols here. They are brothers sharing the same hard world, breathing the same dust, standing on the same unforgiving ground with offerings in their hands and old hurt growing like mold in a sealed jar. You can feel the tension before it breaks. That is one thing this scroll enjoys. It does not rush past the human part. It lets the resentment sit at the table with everybody. It lets you hear sandals scrape. It lets you watch a jaw tighten. It lets the silence between brothers get longer and uglier until the field itself feels nervous. Then blood hits the dirt. The earth takes it. And now the family has learned, immediately and horribly, what kind of place this is going to be. That tone never quite leaves. Generations move. Men build. Women bear children until they are exhausted in body and ancient in spirit. Herds spread. Tents multiply. Settlements rise. Fields are claimed. Wells are argued over. Every family becomes larger and more complicated. which in ancient terms means more useful labor and more opportunities for somebody to say exactly the wrong thing. You move into the days before the flood, and the world feels swollen, crowded, violent, loud. People marry, feast, boast, and do whatever seems good in the moment. Fires burn late, wine is poured, music carries over open ground. Men with too much confidence and not enough wisdom strut around as if breath itself were a personal achievement. Women work through all of it because people still need bread and water, and somebody still has to scrub the pot when the party ends. The camps smell ripe. Roasted meat, spilled drink, sweat, animal skins, smoke, trampled grass, and the sour note of a crowd that has not bathed properly in a very long time. You step through refuse, bones, dropped crusts, and puddles that could be water, could be wine, and could be an insult from nature itself. Noah appears in that mess like a man who has already had enough. He is not cute. No one in this world is cute. He is weathered, stubborn, and busy with a project so ridiculous that everybody around him probably has comments. Of course they do. Human beings will mock anything if it takes longer than an afternoon and doesn't immediately produce snacks. So there he is, building, warning, enduring, while the world around him keeps acting like tomorrow is a myth invented by boring people. You know that smell from before, but now it grows monstrous. Fresh-cut wood, pitch, wet rope, animal musk, fear, dung by the wagon load, feed sacks tearing open, birds flapping filth into your hair, hooves pounding planks, sheep producing pellets with machine-like dedication. The Ark is not a charming zoo cruise. It is a floating crisis box. You spend 1 hour inside and immediately want to apologize to dry land. But the scroll is eager. It moves. It lunges. It keeps adding details like a storyteller who cannot believe you were going to leave out the best part, which in this case usually means the loudest part or the bloodiest part, or the part where a family disagreement becomes regional history. After the waters, the lines spread again. Nations form. Men gather retainers. Cities rise out of mud brick and ambition. Towers get planned by people who are entirely too pleased with themselves. You can smell fresh mortar in the heat, wet clay, sweat, chopped straw, urine from laborers who did not want to walk all the way to the edge of the site because productivity, apparently, matters more than dignity. Everybody is building something. A wall, a house, a name, a dynasty, a grievance. Jasher loves that part of the world, the rough place where households become clans and clans become armies. You feel the scale changing. A father with sons becomes a chief with warriors. A camp with flocks becomes a settlement with guards. An insult between men becomes a feud between peoples. And now the old names are marching. You hear of kings before kings are even a proper habit. Men rising out of cities with banners, chariots, trumpets, and the kind of confidence that usually ends with somebody face first in dust. You stand outside a camp and watch bronze flash in morning light. Horses stamp and snort. Leather creaks. Spearheads catch the sun. Men spit, adjust belts, boast too loudly, and try not to look terrified. The smell is unforgettable. Horse sweat, old blood in the seams of armor, oiled leather, garlic on men's breath, and the iron tang of sharpened weapons laid out on cloth. Fires burn low under pots of grain mash. Somebody is vomiting discreetly behind a wagon because courage and nausea often travel together. Then Abraham enters this wider, rougher world. Not just the wandering patriarch under stars, not just the quiet man of promise, Now he moves with servants, flocks, armed men, and the kind of household complexity that makes every departure feel like relocating a small nation. You stand in his camp and realize immediately that faith does not eliminate logistics. It gives them more room. Servants are loading skins. Women are wrapping bread. Boys are driving animals that absolutely do not want to be driven. A baby is crying. A goat has gotten into the grain. Someone is looking for a missing knife. Somebody else swears they handed over the tent pegs, and now nobody can prove it. That is before any kings show up. Then the war stories roll in, and the air gets hotter. You know the broad shape. Eastern kings, Western kings, cities of the plain, alliances held together with fear and convenience. But here everything gets more elbows and teeth. Armies move over cracked ground. Dust rises in sheets. Scouts run in with news and lungs full of dirt. Men count numbers, sharpen blades, and tell each other lies dressed as confidence. You are in the camp at night before battle. The firelight makes everyone look half-haunted. Meat crackles on skewers, though nobody is enjoying it properly. Waterskins are passed. A commander kneels in the dirt, drawing lines with a stick. Men lean in close, smell each other's sweat, and nod as though they fully understand the plan. They do not. One keeps glancing at the dark because he is certain he heard movement. Another is quietly mending a sandal strap because going into battle with footwear problems is a deeply humiliating way to meet your end. In the distance, horses jolt against their tethers. The wind carries dust, ash, and the stink of the nearby marshes. Morning comes, and battle is exactly as glamorous as you feared, which is to say, not glamorous at all. You run with the others. Sandals slap hard earth. Your mouth dries instantly. Dust lifts under hundreds of feet and gets into your eyes, nose, ears, and soul. Men shout names, commands, curses, prayers, and several things that are probably all four at once. Spears fly. Shields shudder. Somebody falls and is immediately trampled because war has the bedside manner of a collapsing shed. The noise is shocking. Metal on metal. Men grunting. Horses screaming in a way you will remember against your will. Sling stones whining through air. A chariot wheel hitting a rut and almost taking the driver's teeth with it. Somewhere nearby, a man is trying to sound brave and failing with incredible volume. Abraham's rescue of Lot comes in this atmosphere. No distant stained glass dignity. This is a hard pursuit over rough land. Men driving fast, sleeping badly, eating whatever keeps them upright, then striking under cover of dark. You can feel the decision in the camp before it happens. Lot has been taken. Family, however annoying, remains family. So the old man gathers his trained men and goes after kings. That it's commitment. That is also a deeply inconvenient weekend. You march by torchlight. Dust sticks to the sweat behind your knees. The straps on your sandals have turned into instruments of accusation. Men breathe through open mouths. Their cloaks smell of lanolin, smoke, and long travel. No one speaks more than necessary, because talking wastes moisture, and also because everyone is wondering whether this plan is madness. It might be, but they go, and when they strike, it is all confusion and impact and yelling in the dark. Torches bob, camels rear. A man wakes from sleep directly into panic and a spear. Another runs the wrong direction and introduces himself to a ditch. Lot's captors learn, briefly and unpleasantly, that wealthy shepherd clans can become military units when sufficiently annoyed. By dawn, the captives are coming back. You walk among them. Some are limping, Some are carrying children too tired to cry. Some have faces grey with shock and dust pasted in the corners of their mouths. Donkeys drag loads. Women clutch bundles. Men look around like people who have not yet accepted survival. Lot is there with all his goods and household, and that special expression relatives wear when they know they were rescued by someone they absolutely did not listen to. Awkward. Then the family stories tighten again. That is another thing this scroll does, beautifully, in the most chaotic way possible. It moves from armies to domestic tension without lowering the temperature. 1 minute, kings are falling in valleys. The next minute, you are standing inside a tent, and the conflict is over inheritance, favor, marriage, jealousy, or the simple fact that human beings trapped in close quarters eventually become unbearable. You enter Abraham's household and immediately feel the pressure. Multiple servants, multiple loyalties, promises hanging in the air, Sarah carrying dignity like a blade, Hagar carrying pain where everybody can see it if they dare look. The tent walls hold heat, whispers, and grievances equally well. Outside, animals complain and children shriek. Inside, every glance has layers. You have never needed personal space more. Too bad. Ancient camp life offers roughly the privacy of a crowded bus made from goat hair. You hear coughing, snoring, muttering, nursing, grinding grain, babies fussing, somebody scraping a bowl, somebody else scratching themselves with a concentration usually reserved for sculpture. Every domestic emotion happens within earshot of 6 relatives and a servant carrying lentils. So yes, when family tensions rise, everybody gets front row seats. Isaac grows. Ishmael grows. Sarah watches. Hagar feels it. Abraham is trying to keep peace in a household built from promise, compromise, miracle, and trouble. That is not a stable recipe. It is stew left too long near the fire. One bubble and the whole thing spits. Then we are off again. Funerals, weddings, births, oaths, burials in caves, negotiations at city gates where old men sit with the gravity of officials and the gossip habits of neighbors leaning over a fence. You stand near the transaction for Sarah's burial place and hear the courtesy language flow back and forth, full of respect, generosity, and the ancient equivalent of everybody pretending they are not haggling. The cave matters, land matters, bones matter. You follow the funeral procession and the mood changes completely. Feet slow, voices lower, dust rises softly around mourners' sandals. Women wail from deep in the chest, not dainty crying, but the full-bodied sound of grief refusing to be tidy. Men tear garments, beat breasts, bow faces. The dead are wrapped, carried, laid away with spices and cloth and trembling hands. Death in this world is close enough to smell. Resin, myrrh, sweat, dry stone. The faint sweetness of oils trying to push back against the fact that human flesh does not stay. That cave closes, and the family line keeps moving anyway. Isaac steps forward, and the whole scene changes flavor. He is quieter, but the household around him is not. Rebecca arrives with motion and intelligence and enough personality to redirect traffic. The women at the well talk. The servants report. Camels belch and kneel and smell exactly like wet. Ropes stuffed with bad opinions. Marriage happens, and from the start you can feel that this family will not be simple. Then come the twins. Oh, these boys. Before they can even grow beards properly, the air around them feels competitive. Esau comes in from the field smelling of sun, leather, animal hide, and that feral outdoors scent that says he has either hunted something or slept under a bush for 3 days. Jacob smells more like tents, wool, cooked food, and plans. Nobody uses those words out loud, maybe, but everybody feels them. Dinner becomes destiny. You are sitting there with lentil stew steaming in a pot, thick and red and smelling of onions, herbs, and one of the few moments in ancient life when soft food is a genuine blessing. Esau staggers in, half-starved, and dramatically convinced death is moments away. Jacob sees his chance with the calm, terrifying focus of a man rearranging furniture in his own favor. One bowl later, the family has a future problem. Then the blessing scene arrives, and you can practically hear every person involved making choices that will echo like dropped pottery. Isaac, old and dim-eyed, Rebekah moving fast, Jacob sweating under borrowed hair and borrowed clothes, Esau out in the field trusting the day. The tent smells of cooked meat, goat skins, old age, and panic. Everybody is acting. Everybody is listening. Somebody should have stopped this. Nobody does. By the time Esau returns and the truth spills out, the air itself feels split open. You can hear him cry out. Not elegant sorrow, not noble restraint, just the sound of a man discovering that his brother has reached into the future and carried something off. It bounces around the tent poles and goes straight into your spine. Now we are in vendetta territory. Jacob runs. Of course he runs. You would too. Esau is not writing a measured letter about boundaries. He is furious in the old, dangerous way. So Jacob goes east with fear in his stomach, dust on his feet, and a family gift for complication. And when he reaches Laban's world, the family drama somehow gets worse, which feels rude but accurate. Laban's household is its own catastrophe. Sheep everywhere, servants everywhere, daughters with eyes full of separate storms, deals made, delayed, reworked, and spiritually pickpocketed. Wedding feasts with enough food and wine to loosen judgment, tents full of laughter, music, sweat, smoke, and eventually one of the most astonishing marital surprises in all ancient literature. You wake up after a wedding night and discover you married the other sister. Can you imagine? Actually, do not. It is too stressful. The camp the next morning has the brittle feel of people pretending not to hear what they have absolutely heard. Somebody is baking bread too loudly. Somebody is taking goats out earlier than necessary. One servant nearly chokes trying not to react. Jacob is furious. Laban is smooth as old oil. Leah is in the middle of this nightmare through no fault of her own. Rachel is standing there with years of consequences loading themselves onto her face. And now you have a household built like a pressure cooker. Years pass. Children arrive in clusters. Competition blooms. Mandrakes enter the conversation for reasons no one enjoys explaining. Wives bargain. Maids bear sons. Jacob tries to manage wages, flocks, father-in-law schemes, and a domestic situation so tense the air in the tents probably crackled. At night, you hear babies crying from 3 directions, while sheep cough outside and adults do complicated emotional arithmetic in the dark. You almost miss the wars. Almost. Because then Jacob goes home. The march back is thick with dread. Herds moving, children bouncing in saddles or walking in little lines, women watching the road, servants whispering, dust coating everybody from hem to eyebrow. News comes that Esau approaches with men, and suddenly every old decision rises from the grave fully dressed. You spend that night with Jacob by the river. He's alone. The camp is across the water. The dark smells of mud, reeds, and nervous sweat. Frogs pulse in the shallows. An insect whines near your ear. The air is heavy, and sleep does not come. Instead comes struggle. Wrestling in the dark until skin slicks with sweat, and muscles burn, and breath tears in the throat. Morning finds him limping. That feels right. Nobody in this family gets transformed neatly. The reunion with Esau trembles all the way up to the moment it happens. You stand beside the road while gifts go out in waves. Goats, sheep, camels, cattle, servants carrying peace offerings with the look of people who know they are also bait. Then Esau appears, and all your muscles lock. Men behind him, dust around them, weapons at belts, the whole future waiting on one brother's face. Then the impossible thing. He runs to meet Jacob and embraces him. After all that poison, all that fear, all those years, the brothers weep in each other's arms out in the dirt. The smell is road dust, livestock, old hurt, and relief so sharp it makes your chest ache. You could collapse on the spot. Do not get too comfortable. This scroll does not believe in long, calm stretches. Soon enough, you are in Joseph's world, and if ever a family meal looked one insult away from becoming a saga, it is this one. Jacob loves the boy too visibly. The brothers hate him too openly. Joseph, meanwhile, possesses the astonishing confidence of a younger sibling who has never once considered editing himself for safety. He tells the dreams. Of course he tells the dreams. You are there in the field when he approaches later, coat bright, face open, walking toward men who have had enough. The sun is hard. The sheep stink. The brothers are dirty, hungry, and stewing in old resentment like meat forgotten in summer heat. One sees him first. Another starts talking. By the time Joseph gets close, murder has already been discussed. The pit is dry. That almost makes it worse. You hear him shouting from below, voice bouncing off stone, while above him the brothers sit down to eat. To eat. Bread in hand. Maybe some dried figs. Maybe curds. Maybe one of them wiping grease on his tunic while their brother begs from a hole in the ground. Family dysfunction has achieved professional level. Then traders appear. Camels, spices, gum, resin, dust, foreign accents, leather creaking. Joseph gets hauled up, sold, and taken away while the brothers work up the nerve to go home with blood on the coat and lies in their mouths. The goat's blood smells sharp and metallic. Jacob's grief, when it comes, fills the whole tent complex like smoke. Funeral processions are one thing. Ambiguous loss is another beast entirely. You sit in that household with mourning that cannot settle. No body, no grave, just a torn garment, an old father collapsing inward, and brothers carrying a secret that will rot inside them for years. Meals continue because they must. Bread is still baked. Flocks still move. Babies still cry. But the center of the family has gone sour. And somewhere down the road, Joseph is rattling toward Egypt. The section keeps expanding, old names given room to breathe and bleed and boast and fail. That is the peculiar force of this book. It takes figures you know from the short version and sends them back into the dust where people actually lived. They are not marble. They are sweaty. They argue. They bury their dead. They get tricked at weddings. They chase kings at night. They bring stew to the table and accidentally alter history. The scribe's voice rolls on in the lamp glow. Around you, the room has gone quieter still. Someone is asleep against the wall, mouth open, snoring softly like a tiny saw through damp wood. Another listener has pulled a shawl up over one shoulder. The oil in the lamp sits low, and every now and then the flame gutters, making the shadows lurch across the plaster. But the scroll itself is all movement. Courtyards, camps, wells, funeral caves, battle lines, family tents, dust in your teeth the whole time. You can feel why people would keep stories like these around. Not because they are polished, because they are alive in the rough way old family memory is alive. Nobody remembers the ancestors as tidy. They remember who ran, who fought, who lied, who loved badly, who carried the body, who came home with captives, who brought gifts, who ruined supper. And that rough memory has muscle. By now your own mouth tastes stale from the long night. You can feel grit at the corners of your eyes. Your shoulder aches from leaning on one elbow. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once and stops. The air in the room is cooler now, though still thick with people, wool, smoke, and the faint vinegar tang of old wine spilled earlier. The scribe smooths the scroll. And you know there is more coming. More heroes with entirely too much confidence. More brothers behaving like disasters in coordinated outfits. More kings discovering that genealogy and revenge make a volatile stew. More women holding households together while men ride off to improve nothing with weapons. More old names returning from memory with dirt under their nails, and one fresh grievance ready to go. The night itself seems to lean in. Because once you have heard the familiar names spoken this way, they do not go back to being flat. Abraham now smells like campfire and pursuit. Isaac tastes like goat stew and deception. Jacob limps through dust and wedding politics. Esau carries the wild field on his skin. Joseph shouts from a pit while his brothers chew. Nobody stays framed on a wall. They step out into the yard, and now, before the room can fully settle from all that family noise and battlefield grit, the next scroll waits nearby with a different sort of trouble in it. Bigger trouble, in fact. Trouble with footprints large enough to fill with rainwater. Trouble that makes ordinary family betrayal look almost manageable. Almost. Because somewhere just beyond the circle of lamp smoke, somebody is unrolling a story where the neighborhood problem is no longer an angry brother or a boastful king. It is something far larger and far less human. A footstep lands somewhere in the dark outside the circle of lamp smoke, and the whole room seems to flinch. Not because anyone heard a man walking, because nobody walks like that. The sound is wrong for ordinary life. Too heavy, too deep. It does not patter or scrape or shuffle. It lands with the rude authority of a millstone dropped from shoulder height. You feel it first in your ribs, then in the mat beneath you, then in the cup by somebody's knee, where the leftover wine shivers against the clay. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about, perhaps because it involves very large sums, very bad decisions, and the sort of footsteps that rearrange your morning. The scribe leans over the next scroll, and the air changes. Jasher was loud, dusty, crowded with people making awful family choices in close quarters. This is different. This feels like when dogs go quiet for no obvious reason. The room is still the same room. The lamp still burns with that thick olive smell. Somebody still snores softly against the wall like a goat with sinus problems. But the story opening in front of you has a colder edge. You are out before dawn. The ground is damp from night mist, and your sandals pick up mud that sucks at the soles. Sheep are restless in the fold. A cow is making that low, uneasy sound large animals make when they know something is wrong, but cannot send an email about it. The watchman is not joking this morning. He is standing on the wall peering toward the hills, jaw set, one hand resting on rough stone slick with dew. Then you see the print. At first, you think the rain gouged a pit in the path. Then you step closer. No, that is a footprint big enough to bathe a child in. Heel deep as a basin, toes pressed into the mud, like someone pushed storage jars into the earth and pulled them back out. Water from the night has pooled inside it, and one confused frog has already claimed the thing as real estate. Your stomach drops. Around you, people gather. Carefully, which is to say nobody wants to be first and nobody wants to be last. A boy points and gets yanked back by the shoulder. An old man squints, spits into the dirt, and says nothing, which is how you know he is actually alarmed. Women clutch shawls tighter over their hair and look toward the animal pens. The animals are already telling the story. Goats are crowding one side of the enclosure, eyes wide and stupid, and somehow still more perceptive than half the village. Chickens have gone absolutely feral. One is on top of a wall for reasons known only to itself and the collapse of civilization. The donkeys keep tossing their heads and blowing through their noses, ears twitching toward the eastern ridge. Nobody likes the ridge now. You follow the path out beyond the fields, and the prints keep going. Each one is a crater. Mud, gravel, smashed reeds, broken stalks of barley laid down flat as though a wagon rolled over them, except no wagon leaves toe marks. One irrigation ditch is simply gone, not damaged, gone, flattened into a broad, slick trench, as if a very large person came through half asleep and treated local agriculture like a minor inconvenience. This is what it is like when the neighborhood problem is 40 feet tall. You know those mornings when you wake up, walk outside, and discover the roof leaked, the dog ate something cursed, and the neighbor's fence fell over into your herbs. This is not that. This is walking out with a water jar and realizing something large enough to use your orchard as an armrest has passed through in the night. The story reaches back into those old days before the flood, when the earth was already going bad in a crowded, noisy human way. But now, there is another layer to the mess. Not just violence, not just corruption, not just people acting like tomorrow was optional. Now there are these beings, the offspring of rebellion, huge and hungry and wrong-sized for the world. Wrong-sized is important, because it is not just that they are big, it is that they do not fit. You picture ordinary life around them and everything becomes ridiculous. Doorways? Useless. Chairs? Adorable. Bowl of stew? A garnish. Even a good, healthy tree starts looking like celery. They move through human landscapes like adults walking through a child's toy village, except less careful and much meaner. And the hunger. That is where the dread really starts to smell. You are in the fields at noon, cutting grain under a sun that has decided mercy is for other climates. Sweat runs down your spine. Gnats orbit your face. The stalks scratch your wrists. Nearby, workers bend and rise, each carrying the tired rhythm of people who know bread does not appear by wishing. Then the shadows move over the field. Everyone stops, not because a cloud passed, because clouds do not grunt. At the edge of the harvest stand figures too large to be mistaken for anything else. Limbs like young tree trunks, hair hanging in ropes, faces broad and unsettlingly human, which somehow makes it worse. You could handle a proper monster. Fangs, scales, a dramatic tale, some commitment to the genre. But these look like humanity enlarged, until all the proportions turn threatening. One crouches. You hear the wheat heads snapping under his feet. He reaches into the field and tears up a swath of grain with one hand, roots and dirt and all, like a man grabbing herbs from a kitchen garden. Soil rains down. Workers back away in silence. Nobody is going to file a complaint. Nobody is going to discuss zoning ordinances. You are one bad glance away from being a smear in the furrows. The giant stuffs the grain into his mouth, raw, dirt still clinging to the roots. You watch him chew with the blank concentration of somebody eating, because everything in his body is built around appetite. Another one reaches for a tethered goat. The goat, to its credit, objects strenuously for half a second. Then there is only a rope jerking loose and several villagers suddenly developing a passionate interest in not existing loudly. This is not sustainable, even by ancient standards, and ancient standards are generous. People can survive on rough bread, sour wine, and the determined belief that tomorrow's lentils might have onions. They cannot survive sharing a valley with beings who treat livestock as finger food. The story never lets you feel safe around them, but it does something stranger too. It brings you close enough to hear them worry. That is the part that gets under your skin, because monsters you understand. Eat, stomp, shout, ruin everybody's week. Fine. Horrifying, but simple. Monsters who have started having dreams. Monsters who wake up afraid. Monsters who look at each other with the sick expression of men realizing the bill has arrived. That is a different flavor of dread entirely. You are near a campfire at dusk. Not their fire exactly, more the miserable humankind kept low behind rocks where smoke might not carry. The smell is thin lentil mash, singed wool, and fear. Somebody beside you is clutching a child too tightly. Another man keeps craning his neck toward the ravine below, where voices drift upward. Deep voices, not booming every second like a stage performance. That would almost be silly. No, worse. Their speech carries in fragments, low and heavy, like boulders knocking together. You catch names. Mahwai, Hahya, Ohya. Big beings with names that should not sound so personal. It is rude, frankly. Once something is large enough to uproot your fig trees by accident, it ought to have a title like the Devourer of Valleys. Instead, you get a name that sounds like someone's cousin. And now the nightmare has paperwork. They are speaking urgently, not angry, not boasting, afraid. One had a dream, then another. Dreams in the night, not ordinary bad sleep brought on by too much roasted goat and a bad conscience, but visions that cling like cobwebs to the face after waking. You know the feeling. You wake before dawn with your heart running ahead of you, sure that something has gone terribly wrong, though the room looks the same. Multiply that by a creature the size of a gate tower. The giant tells it badly at first. He is too disturbed to be impressive. You hear him trying to describe a garden destroyed, trees torn up, a tablet washed away in water, or a great destruction coming that leaves almost nothing standing. His words stumble. Another interrupts. A third swears it must mean something else. But underneath all the bluster is the same awful realization. The dream was not random. It was a warning, and suddenly the beings who terrified the earth are themselves terrified. That has a smell to it. Cold sweat, even in a big body. Damp hide. Smoke in tangled hair. The sharp animal scent of panic beginning under the skin. You hear one pacing. Each turn of his steps sends little slides of grit down the ravine wall. Another tears at a branch while he talks, stripping leaves without noticing. even their anxiety is destructive. The names pass back and forth again. Mahwoi, the ones sent to find answers. Poor man, poor giant, poor whatever category applies here. Imagine getting chosen for the impossible errand because you seem the most competent among a group of colossal doom brothers. Your task is to go seek out the dream interpreter, the seer, the righteous man, the one whose name is circulating with that uncomfortable reputation for hearing from heaven. This is the ancient version of being told, "You seem good with people." Could you go ask judgment itself what exactly it meant by that? So Mahweh goes. The journey has the unreality of a fever. You move with him over broken ground where ordinary men would struggle for footing, and he covers distance in strides, though not happily. Rivers cut through rock, reed beds shiver in wind, birds explode upward from marshes as he passes. Villages vanish behind shut doors when rumor runs ahead of him. Nobody wants to be the person standing outside when a giant, visibly stressed, arrives asking for directions. He crosses wasteland where the air tastes of dust and stone. The sun burns overhead. The nights freeze. His feet crack hard soil and sink in softer patches. He passes old trees twisted by weather. He skirts settlements where dogs bark until they realize scale is against them and retreat into existential despair. You feel the oddness of it all. A creature born from rebellion, built like a siege problem, traveling alone with questions. And every night the dreams still gnaw. You have known bad anticipation, waiting for a sick child to wake, waiting for a judge to speak, waiting for a father to come home angry. This is that, only stretched across mythic distance. Mahweh is not merely traveling. He is carrying dread from camp to camp, step to step. It rides his shoulders. It hollows his voice. It turns every sunset into another deadline missed. The story around him feels fragmented, dream-broken. That suits it. Nothing in this part unfolds like a neat village anecdote with clear beginning, middle, and end. It comes in torn images. A giant flying or racing through the air. A meeting with holy figures. A message written down. Fear moving through a camp bigger than houses. It is less like hearing a clean report and more like listening to survivors compare nightmare notes while dawn barely gets started. You know how sometimes a dream makes perfect sense while you are inside it, then sounds ridiculous the moment you explain it. This is not that. This still sounds terrifying in daylight. At last, the answer comes. Not comfort. Nobody gets comfort here. The meaning is destruction, judgment, washing away, end of the violent generation and all its oversized consequences. The rebellious fathers have brought corruption, and the giant sons, for all their scale and swagger, are not going to stomp their way out of what is coming. You can almost feel the moment the message lands among them, because the atmosphere changes from tense confusion to that worse thing, certainty. Certainty is brutal. Confusion lets you talk. Certainty makes you sit down. You are back near their gathering place now, hidden behind scrub and stone with other human watchers who absolutely should have gone home, but cannot resist hearing what the monsters will do with the news. The ground smells of dust, old droppings, and crushed sage under knees and sandals. Flies worry a dead lizard nearby. The sky has gone that dry bronze color before evening. Below, the giants receive the interpretation. One curses. One groans like a tree trunk splitting in winter. One just stares at the ground. That might be the worst reaction of all, because again, They are not abstract beasts. They are sons hearing sentence. Too late? Yes. Terrible? Yes. Violent, destructive, and fully implicated? Yes. But still, you are close enough to watch dread move across actual faces. One presses both hands over his head. Another grabs his brother's arm hard enough to bruise stone. Their size stops being impressive and becomes pathetic in the old sense of the word. They are huge children discovering there is nowhere to hide. The rebellious fathers hover over all of it like a bad smell that never leaves the room. The watchers, the ones who crossed boundaries they should not have touched, the ones who descended and took and taught and corrupted and set this whole disaster in motion. You do not need a lecture about heavenly rebellion when you can stand in a valley and see the result. Chewing through grain stores. This is what some choices grow into. Not elegant consequences, not tasteful symbolism, gigantic sons with trauma and body counts. It is a family catastrophe on a cosmic scale. And still, absurdly, there are meetings. Of course there are meetings. Even doom requires administration, apparently. The giants confer. They send messengers. They compare dreams, as if enough bad sleep might somehow average out into a better answer. One recounts seeing a garden destroyed except for a few trees. Another saw water and a tablet, judgment and erasure. They argue over details like men around a table trying to interpret a deeply cursed group chat from upper management. You almost want to laugh. Then one of them slams a hand into the earth and splits a stone. So perhaps keep the laughter internal. The human world under their shadow keeps suffering in practical ways. That matters too. It is not all cosmic dread and symbolic trees. You still have farmers discovering half a field flattened, shepherds finding blood and wool where sheep used to be, mothers shoving children indoors before sunset, tradesmen traveling in larger groups because nobody wants to be a roadside snack. Village life becomes a study in nerves. You hurry to wells and back. You sleep lightly. Every night sound gets interrogated. Was that thunder? Wagon wheels? A giant clearing his throat? The walls feel too low. The doors feel too thin. A rooster crows before dawn, and 3 people nearly have heart failure because everything startles you now. And the footprints keep appearing. One by the ford where women draw water. Another near the threshing floor. Another beside a stand of tamarisk where 2 boys used to play and now absolutely do not. Rain collects in them. Insects skim the surface. Children are forbidden to go near them, which naturally makes them intensely interesting. One reckless teenager puts his own foot inside one and discovers he can stand in the impression with room to spare for disappointment, future therapy, and a small basket. The scale never becomes normal. That is the point. You cannot domesticate this kind of disorder. You cannot fold it into the usual ancient miseries and say, well, every age has its problems. Locusts are a problem. Taxation is a problem. Your cousin moving his goats onto your side of the marker stones is a problem. A race of giant beings born from heavenly rebellion and now plagued by prophetic nightmares is a whole separate municipal category. The nights grow stranger. Sometimes the giants do not rampage. Sometimes they sit awake. You glimpse them on distant slopes against starlight, huge shoulders bent, talking in low bursts. One looks upward for too long, and you feel a chill despite the heat. There is something deeply unnerving about a being large enough to terrify a village, suddenly acting like a frightened son trying to read his father's face. The stars overhead are hard and bright. The wind drags dust through scrub. A jackal calls in the distance. Below it all, those huge figures keep speaking of dreams. One of them, Ohya, is especially shaken. He recounts what he saw with the desperate insistence of someone replaying disaster, frame by frame, hoping for a loophole. Hachya answers. Mahwai returns with the interpretation. The names circle. The dread tightens. You can sense the old instinct in them, the one all-powerful beings seem to share when consequences finally arrive. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. There has not. That realization settles over the camp like ash. No sacrifice fixes this. No raid solves it. No intimidating display of muscles and uprooted cedar trunks changes the decree. They are built for force and now face something force cannot shove. For creatures who have spent their existence being the largest fact in every room, that must feel unbearable. You know the human version in miniature. A father who can control his household but not illness. A king who can command armies but not sleep. A rich man who can buy grain but not peace. Now enlarge that into monstrous scale. The giants can crush walls, but they cannot crush a flood. They can terrify villages, but they cannot terrify judgment into changing its mind. That is when the eeriness turns intimate, because fear makes everyone familiar, not equal, not harmless, just recognizable. You hear one ask what will happen to their children. Another asks whether any remnant survives. Another sounds angry, not because he disbelieves the sentence, but because he believes it completely and hates the feeling. Their voices crack in places. Even giants apparently can sound young when terrified enough. It would almost break your heart. Then you remember the villages, the blood, the fields, the bodies. So what you feel is not pity exactly, more like the terrible closeness of watching doom become conscious. The story's images come in flashes now. A written message, a journey back, giants assembled in a place broad enough to hold them, faces lifted toward a verdict they already know will not favor them. The air before a storm. Not literal rain yet, maybe, but the mood of everything tightening. Animals refuse feed. Birds move strangely. The sky looks too large and too clean, like it has made room for something. You stand with the small people of the earth and feel very small indeed. Mud under your sandals, sweat cooling on your neck, dust at the hem of your tunic, a cracked fingernail, a sore shoulder from lifting jars. All the normal humiliations of bodily life continue while colossal doom debates theology on the hill. There is something almost insulting about that. The lentils still need stirring. The baby still has a rash. Your roof still leaks. Also, there are giants with prophetic nightmare syndrome. No one ordered this combination. As the visions spread through their ranks, the giants begin to fracture in spirit. Not all at once. Not dramatically at first. One grows reckless. Another goes quiet. Another rages louder because silence would mean feeling things. Their camp smells rank now, like too many huge bodies sleeping badly. Smoke, damp wool or skins, old meat, sour breath, unwashed hair, and the unmistakable odor of panic marinating in a closed emotional system. You have smelled fear in stables before storms. This is that, but enormous. Sometimes they still eat. Of course they eat. Dread does not cure appetite. If anything, it sharpens it. You hear bones cracking, livestock bawling, the gross, wet business of large mouths dealing with flesh. That is part of what makes this section so awful. The giants can tremble before judgment and still be dangerous before breakfast. Existential crisis has not made them considerate neighbors. Meanwhile, the righteous man far off, the dream interpreter, the one tied to the message, stands like a dark post in the whole tale. You do not spend much time lounging with him. This is not that sort of story. He is more like a fixed point everyone else circles around in panic. A human being who receives what heaven intends, while creatures far larger than he are reduced to anxious messengers. That reversal matters in your bones before it reaches your brain. Big is not the same as secure. Loud is not the same as safe. Terrifying everybody is not the same as escaping what comes next. You watch Marway again after the message is delivered. He looks exhausted. However a giant looks exhausted, that is what he looks like. Shoulders low, movements slower, voice scraped raw. He has done the impossible errand and brought back the impossible answer, and now he gets to stand among his companions while they absorb it. No one thanks him. That also feels realistic. Messengers rarely get casseroles. Night presses down. The campfires of men are tiny pinpricks far off. The giants' fires, where they have them, glow larger and lower, like kiln mouths in the dark. Smoke drifts across the valley carrying grease, char, and the bitter scent of green wood burned too fast. Somewhere, an infant cries, then is hushed. Somewhere else, a giant shouts in his sleep, and half the birds in the ravine explode upward at once. By morning, nobody feels rested. The world is waiting. That is the true mood now, waiting. The dreams have named what is coming, and every ordinary thing becomes sharper because of it. Bread tastes drier. Water feels more precious. Sunlight on stone looks too bright. Children's laughter, when it appears at all, sounds startlingly fragile. Even the flies buzzing over refuse seem busier, like tiny undertakers warming up. The giant suns, for all their scale, cannot return to ignorance. Neither can you. You have heard them ask what will become of them. You have watched dread climb up bodies built to inspire it in others. You have seen the strange humiliation of monstrous strength, discovering that judgment is larger still. And now the air itself seems to lean forward. Somewhere clouds are gathering, perhaps not yet over this exact hill, not yet above this exact field with its bent barley and frightened goats, but gathering all the same. The earth carries that pre-storm tension. Birds shift their roots. Wind changes smell. Dust lifts differently. Even the giants seem to sense it in their bones, if creatures like that can still claim bones and not pillars. One last image stays with you. A giant seated on a slope at twilight, elbows on knees, hands hanging useless between them. Around him lie broken branches and crushed stones, because he cannot even despair without wrecking the landscape. His face is turned up toward the darkening sky. He is too large for the hill, too late for innocence, and suddenly not large enough for what is coming. That is the horror of this old fragment. Not merely that the world had monsters, but that the monsters knew. And in the room around you, the lamp crackles softly. Somebody shifts in sleep. The scroll gives off that dry dust smell of scraped skin and old hands. Outside, night holds the walls in place for a little longer. Inside, you sit with the image of those impossible suns whispering over dreams they cannot outrun, while above them the heavens remain vast, ordered and utterly unimpressed. The next corridor is already opening, because once you have listened to giants panic under the stars, you are only one step away from following the man who reads those stars. Like appointments on a cosmic ledger, and from walking the cold passages where watchers fall, storehouses open, and heaven keeps records. No footprint can crush. "You're late," somebody mutters, though nobody in the room has actually moved. It is the scribe saying it to Enoch. Not out loud in the lamplit room, of course, in the story. But you feel the line land anyway, because suddenly you are no longer crouched by clay cups and rolled parchments. You are behind an old man who has somehow become heaven's least optional houseguest, and the giants fade into the dark behind you, while the dark itself opens up like a doorway with opinions. Before long, you are being marched through heaven like a guest who did not realize this tour would be so extensive. The first shock is the cold, not the damp chill before dawn in a village courtyard, not winter winds sneaking under a bad door. This is a cleaner cold, sharp and mineral, as though all the warmth has been carefully removed for storage. Below, earth was dust, sweat, dung, smoke, and lizards sunning themselves on stones. Up here, the air feels rinsed, sterile, almost rude. Your lungs notice, immediately. So do your eyes. The brightness is wrong in a way that makes ordinary daylight seem underfunded. Walls gleam, floors reflect, openings blaze. You squint and keep walking, because the guides do not have the energy of men who stop to ask whether everyone is comfortable. They have the energy of palace officials trying to get through an itinerary. And there are officials. Of course, there are officials. You were perhaps hoping for clouds and a harp somewhere in the distance, maybe one nice beam of light. Instead, you get corridors, thresholds, guarded places, and the strong sense that heaven runs on procedures. Somebody up here loves a locked door. Somebody else is deeply committed to designated areas. It is celestial majesty, yes, but also suspiciously close to a government complex. Enoch keeps going. You keep going because he keeps going. He does not stroll like a tourist. He moves like a man invited and apprehended at the same time, which is probably the correct pace for walking through the upper reaches of creation. Around him, the architecture rises in impossible lines. Stone, fire, crystal, frost, metal, or things that look like all of them at once. You are forever about to decide what you are seeing, and then it changes in the light. One house appears built of hail, another burns without burning down. One wall shines like polished ice, but gives off heat like a kiln. Another doorway seems edged in tongues of flame, and somehow the flame behaves better than most village children. The sound is strange too. No market noise, no donkeys insulting creation, no women pounding grain, no cough from the far sleeping mat. Instead, there is a kind of enormous quiet full of contained motion, like the silence inside a place where everything is functioning exactly as intended. You hear distant rushing, metallic ringing, the crackle of living fire, and occasionally the wing sound of beings who are absolutely not pigeons. You would prefer pigeons. Pigeons are at least committed to being ridiculous. The first places shown to you are not comforting. This is important. You do not arrive in glory and get handed a fig. You are taken, shown, led, and sometimes hauled toward the parts of heaven that look less like celebration and more like evidence storage. Deep pits, bound spaces, prison-like hollows where rebellion has been parked with finality. The kind of locations where even your sandals would lower their voice if sandals could do that. And now we arrive at the part where the watchers stop being a rumor and become inmates. You stand at the edge of a place that looks torn open from the inside. Rock walls plunge down into shadow. The air rising from it is bitter, metallic, and cold enough to sting your teeth. There is no pleasant way to describe the smell. Old storm, wet iron, scorched stone, and the stale trapped odor of somewhere nobody has cleaned because nobody intends release. You know that smell from lesser places on earth, storage pits, cistern mouths, tomb chambers opened after too long. This is all of that, but judgment-sized. Below, there are beings confined, not giant suns this time. The fathers, the watchers who came down, crossed lines, ruined what they touched, and now sit in custody with all the dignity of disgraced officials awaiting sentencing. You cannot make out every face clearly, which is almost worse. You get enough. Shapes in gloom, eyes like banked coals, the sense of presence held down rather than absent, power but chained to consequence. One moves, chains answer. The sound goes straight through you. It is not a theatrical clank. No stage drama here. This is heavier, slower, uglier, metal or something worse dragged over stone by a being who used to move freely through heavens and now gets 6 inches of spiteful traction. You feel it in your knees. Beside you, Enoch does not turn away. Neither do you. Not because you are brave, because horror with structure is hard to leave. The guards here are not sleepy. No one is leaning on a spear wondering when lunch happens. These are fierce beings, faces severe, stations fixed, carrying out orders with the confidence of creatures who have never once misplaced a file. Nobody argues with them. Nobody asks if there might be a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding phase is over. One of the imprisoned ones speaks. It comes upward, rough and scorched, like someone dragging a voice over gravel. He wants intercession, wants a message carried, wants the man walking among heavenly chambers to take a petition where they themselves may not go. You know the tone from earth. It is the tone of someone who discovered too late that his old access card no longer opens the building. Enoch is the messenger now. Imagine that errand. You are a human being. Your feet blister. Your back aches after a day on rough ground. You have probably had lentils for dinner more often than joy would recommend. And now, towering heavenly rebels are asking you to speak on their behalf. This is the spiritual equivalent of being asked to carry an appeal letter into the king's private quarters while the prison warden watches. No pressure. He takes it. Or rather, he hears it, carries it, brings the request. And the answer he gets is not what they wanted. No restored position, no soft landing, no little note saying regrets all around and perhaps everyone has learned something. The answer comes down hard. They will not ascend again as before. The sentence stands. Their children will perish. The corruption they introduced does not get waved away because they seem emotional now. That must have felt awful to deliver. Again, nobody thanks the messenger. You return to the prison place with the answer, and the mood is exactly what you would expect if condemned heavenly beings received final bad news from a human they had hoped might pull off a miracle. The abyss holds the words like a well holds thrown stones. No one can spit them back out. Some cry out, some rage, some collapse inward. It is catastrophe with wings folded. And still the tour continues. That is one of the strangest parts. No lingering, no grief-counseling alcove, no cup of water and a sit-down. You are shown these things and then moved along, as though heaven has many departments and rebellion management is only one stop on today's route. Cosmic grandeur is busy. There are more rooms. There is more to see. The universe, apparently, has a floor plan. The next corridor opens into brilliance so severe it almost feels personal. If the prison place was damp dread and buried fire, this is the opposite. High chambers, vast spaces, surfaces that shine with such cold clarity, you become aware of every dusty earthly instinct still clinging to you. Your tunic feels grubby. Your skin feels mortal. Your thoughts probably smell like sheep. The contrast is humiliating. And then you see the stars differently, not as decoration, not as pretty holes in the dark, not as things shepherds complain about while sleeping badly on hillsides. Up here, they are ordered beings with routes, times, gates, arrivals, departures. They do not wander around the sky improvising. They keep appointments. They know where to enter and where to leave. There are doors for them, and officials and records. Heavenly astronomy turns out to be less gaze in wonder and more, please consult the schedule. You are shown portals in the horizon of the world, openings where lights emerge in their seasons, great gates cut into the structure of things. You stand there with Enoch while explanations pour over him about courses and circuits and measures and proper times. It is like being trapped inside the universe's most intimidating operations manual. Somewhere below, humanity cannot remember which cousin borrowed the good knife. Up here, stars are arriving on time to the fraction. It is honestly a little embarrassing for us. A guide indicates one gate. From there, certain stars rise. Another gate, others set. There are numbers attached to all of it. Distances, periods, fixed paths, divisions of days. It has the thrilling and slightly suffocating feel of discovering that the sky is run by administrators who never lose count and do not believe in winging it. The stars do not sleep through their shift. The moon does not miss a meeting. Dawn does not wander in late smelling of excuses. Below, men forget feast days. Above, constellations clock in. The moon gets its own treatment. You watch it wax and diminish according to measured allotments, and the explanation comes with the kind of detail that makes your mortal brain want to sit on a rock and eat dry bread until everyone stops talking. Parts of light, seasons, changes, appointed times. It is all very exact, very controlled, very unlike human life, where somebody's goat always escapes on the day you needed things to go smoothly. There are wind chambers too, storehouses. Yes, actual storehouses. You are led toward great repositories where the forces of weather seem kept under management, and it is impossible not to picture heaven as a household run by a frighteningly competent steward. Snow stored, hail kept, rain apportioned, winds directed. Somewhere there might as well be a shelf labeled Thunder Severe. Somewhere else, a responsible angel appears to know exactly how much frost is required for a particular valley at a particular hour. You stand near one of these places and the air changes at once. It smells sharp, mineral, almost like wet stone before a storm, but colder and cleaner. The wind that leaks from within cuts across your face with purpose. Not a lazy breeze. Not the half-hearted puff you get in a hot courtyard when everybody lies to each other and says it's cooler now. This wind has instructions. You can feel it, waiting to be sent. Another chamber carries the dry electric taste of hail. Another, the heavy promise of rain. Another has a stillness so complete it makes the hairs on your arms rise as though thunder is sitting just behind the door with folded arms. Heaven keeps weather like a household keeps grain jars, only with fewer mice. or perhaps no mice. You hope no mice. Imagine the heavenly mouse responsible for nibbling through the sack labeled Winter over Edom. Nobody needs that subplot. The guide does not laugh. Nobody here seems interested in whether you are coping emotionally with the realization that creation is heavily administered. They simply show you more. Reservoirs of darkness, treasuries of light, fiery places, icy places, places where punishment waits, places where blessing starts, every part assigned, every force under command. Down on earth, a storm feels random because it ruins your laundry. Up here, it is dispatched. The sun itself has lanes. Lanes. At this point, you have to admire the commitment. Human kings can barely keep tax records dry through one rainy season. Heaven has mapped the movements of flaming celestial bodies through gates and seasons, and never once misplaced midsummer. Your guide is effectively leading you through cosmic traffic control, and all of it works without one sleepy clerk eating figs in a side room. The stars are not all obedient, though. That dark note returns. You are shown places where some heavenly lights have strayed, failed, gone wrong, or stand condemned for not keeping their appointed order. It is deeply unsettling to discover that even stars can get called into accountability. You grew up with stars as the fixed things, the trustworthy things, the points by which caravans orient themselves and watchmen count the hours. Now you are being told there are stars that did not stay in line. The prison imagery returns. Again the smell changes. Less fresh brilliance now. More the enclosed severity of locked consequence. You come to a place where wayward heavenly beings are held until their time, and the atmosphere is grim enough to make the earlier abyss feel like its unpleasant cousin. Jagged stone, darkness with heat in it, fire that illuminates nothing comfortingly. It is all very final and completely free of decorative touches. This is not a place with cushions. The beings confined here are not chatting. Whatever glory they once had now sits under sentence, and the place holds them with the confidence of a locked chest sunk into bedrock. Their offense is tied to order, to boundaries crossed, to stations abandoned. Heaven keeps returning to that theme with the stubbornness of an administrator who has seen what happens when people stop labeling shelves. The ordinary earth below starts to look different in your memory. You think of village life, the mud ovens, the rank goat pen, a child with snot shining on his lip, a woman scraping burnt porridge from a pot because you cannot waste food simply because it tastes like a roofing tile, men squinting at weather, shepherds checking stars, farmers praying rain comes soon, but not too soon, all of them moving under systems they barely see, and above them, every gate is known, every path measured, every rebellious being accounted for. It is glorious, yes, also slightly terrifying in the way a very tidy household can be terrifying when you arrive with dirty feet. Then comes the mountain of God imagery, and your sense of scale gets manhandled again. You are taken toward heights that make earthly peaks look like piles of laundry. Fire crowns them, light pours over them. Around them move attendants whose appearance would ruin the sleep of anyone who met them unexpectedly in a wheat field. Their garments blaze. Their faces are too bright or too severe. They are not cherubic babies with wings. They are royal servants from a realm where nobody spills lamp oil on important paperwork. The throne area is overwhelming, not cozy, not sentimental, overwhelming. You do not lounge near it discussing your feelings. You approach it the way flesh approaches a furnace, aware of all its limits at once. Fire streams, wheels or something wheel-like move. Voices sound layered, vast, ordered, as if praise itself has structure here and everybody knows their part. Even silence in this place has rank. Enoch comes near enough to receive words. You feel the fear of that in your own body, mouth dry, knees uncertain, skin alive with cold and heat at once. There is majesty here, but not the soft sort people embroider onto curtains. This majesty would flatten your best excuses without pausing. The one seated above all this order is not frantic, not confused, not scrambling to contain the rebellion of watchers or the corruption below. Everything shown so far has made that painfully clear. The prisons are prepared. The courses are fixed. The stars report in. The storehouses remain stocked. Earth feels chaotic because you are standing inside one field of the operation. Heaven sees the whole warehouse. Messages come for humanity too. Warnings, declarations, coming judgment, the fate of kings, the humiliation of the proud, the eventual setting right of what has been twisted. The tour through architecture and prisons and celestial scheduling has not been sightseeing. It has been orientation. Enoch is learning how little of reality can be seen from the ground. You know that sensation in smaller form. You think a household argument is about lentils. Then, 3 years later, you realize it was about grief. You think a king's decree is about taxes. Then soldiers arrive and clarify the situation. You think stars are just stars. Then suddenly you are touring their administration lanes with a human prophet and wishing very much for a nice, uncomplicated donkey. The descent through these revelations does not get simpler. Enoch sees places of blessing and curse, mountains with different properties, valleys set apart for future use, the resting places of the dead divided according to their lot. Even death, apparently, has compartments. Nothing in this cosmos is merely dumped in a pile. There are regions, separations, destinies held in reserve. It is both impressive and faintly exhausting. Everywhere you go, the universe has zoning. One valley holds the dead awaiting one outcome. Another awaits another. One place is bright, one dark, one troubled, one at peace. You stand there realizing that even after death, humanity does not simply become a vague poetic concept floating about like smoke. There are arrangements, distinctions, outcomes. The ancient world was already bad enough without discovering the afterlife has filing cabinets. Somewhere in the middle of all this, you almost miss the sheer physicality. These are not abstract doctrines floating over a clean page. You feel rock underfoot. You feel wind. You smell cold minerals, hot metal, sulfur, stormwater, and the dry, sharp scent of high places where no cooking fire has ever smoked up the rafters. You hear gates, chains, wings, waters, thunder held back, voices layered across distance. The journey keeps your body involved, even when your mind has given up pretending it fully understands the itinerary. That makes it stranger, not easier. By now, Enoch himself feels less like a man from the village and more like a worn traveler who has seen too much structure to go back to ordinary confusion unchanged. You can imagine him descending to people arguing over boundary stones and wedding arrangements, and whose son insulted, whose mother, while somewhere in his mind, entire star courses are still clicking into place. Somebody complains the rains are late. He has seen the storeroom. Somebody swears injustice rules forever. He has walked past the cells. He knows too much to panic the way others do. he also knows too much to be casual. That combination gives the whole section its cold edge. Because the grandeur above does not erase the misery below. It frames it. The desert earth remains what it is. Cracked ground, thorn bushes, animal droppings hardening in the sun, thirsty throats, hands split from labor, smoke-stung eyes. But above that familiar roughness stands a world of terrifying order. Your little life is not ignored. It is placed, judged, seen, timed, measured against a system older and cleaner than your tribe's memory. Comforting? Sometimes. Alarming? Absolutely. And still the stars go on. That image returns because it should. You leave one blazing height and emerge under the night sky again. Only now the sky has become unbearable in its precision. The constellations no longer look casual. They are workers. Every light in its track, every movement signed off by command. Shepherds below think they are simply navigating home. Meanwhile, above them, the heavens are running a schedule that would make Jubilees weep with joy. You almost want to apologize for humanity. Not formally, just a quick note. Sorry about all the lateness, the idolatry, the murders, the crop complaints, the giant incidents, and the general inability to keep one decent calendar. The stars continue without comment. That may be the iciest part of all. They do not wobble when men rage. They do not skip their course when kings boast. They do not get distracted by market rumors or family vendettas or the latest village disaster involving a roof, a goat, and one very foolish nephew. They rise. They set. They answer their order. Above all the human mess, obedience is happening on a scale so vast it feels almost accusatory. And now the watchers make even more sense. Their fall is not merely naughty behavior with cosmic consequences. It is defection from a world where everything else knows its station. When order is this deep, rebellion looks uglier. Not romantic, not daring, ugly, like smoke in clean linen, like sewage in a spring, like a drunken brawl in the archives. You have seen the prisons. You have seen the roots of the stars. One explains the other. By the time the tour begins to slow, you feel what Enoch must feel, dazzled, burdened, and a little frostbitten in the soul. Heaven is glorious, but it is not cozy in these corridors. It is severe in its beauty, splendid, yes, also managed. Every chamber gives off the same underlying message. Nothing here is drifting, not judgment, not mercy, not weather, not stars, not the fate of rebels. Even the cold feels appointed. When you finally look downward again, earth appears almost tender in its disorder. There is the desert, all heat and flies and poor planning. There are camps with smoke leaking from seams. There are women kneading dough with cracked knuckles, men lifting water skins, children chasing each other between jars, old people staring at the sky because that is where news eventually comes from, one way or another. Their lives are fragile, grimy, repetitive, and somehow still precious under all this machinery of heaven. That may be why Enoch walks where he does. Someone has to come back with the news. Someone has to say that the stars are not random, the prisons are occupied, the winds are assigned, and the Holy One has not misplaced the earth among larger concerns. Someone has to stand in dust and remember crystal, to smell goat again and not forget fire, to hear village gossip and still know what judgment sounds like echoing off an abyss wall. So, you follow him down through the last of the cold brilliance. Behind you remain the storehouses, the gates, the stern attendants, the chained watchers, the courses of the sun and moon, the records nobody misfiles. Ahead, waits Earth again, with its heat, its noise, its sweat, its endless, human tendency to make a mess of every gift and then wonder why thunder is gathering. The lamp in the room crackles. The olive oil smells thick again. Your knees are on woven mats, not heavenly crystal. Your cup is clay. Your air is dust and smoke, and one man still snoring into his beard like a badly tuned flute. But the sky above the roof has changed, even though you cannot see it. It is no longer just darkness with lights pinned into it. It is corridors, gates, appointments, witnesses, and somewhere beyond sight, the stars keep their hours, the watchers keep their chains, and the high cold order of heaven goes on, long after human fires have burned down to ash. After all that height and thunder, the scroll softens. Not gently. It drops you straight out of crystal corridors and into dirt so ordinary it almost hurts. No blazing gates now, no star officials, no prison abyss humming under judgment. Just one family outside Eden, and suddenly tragedy smells like soil, sweat, breast milk, wood smoke, and dinner that took far too long to cook. The ground is the first insult. You feel it through bare feet at once, hard-packed in places, sharp with pebbles in others, crusted over, cracked and stubborn. Inside the garden, everything had apparently cooperated. Outside, the earth behaves like a mule with a personal grudge. You scratch at it with your hands, a stick, a sharpened bone, whatever passes for a tool this early in human history, and the ground gives back thorns, dust, and contempt. Adam is working. Of course he is. He has the exhausted look of a man whose job description changed from enjoy creation to fight a field until it stops being rude. Sweat runs down his neck. Dirt cakes under his nails. His shoulders ache in that deep, mean way that says, this is not just a hard day. This is your whole future now. Eve watches him, and the watching is not peaceful. How could it be? The memory of the garden is still close enough to sting. You can feel it hanging over everything they do, like the aftertaste of fruit you cannot rinse from your mouth, no matter how much water you drink. Shade used to be given. Food used to arrive without negotiation. Now every meal starts with labor, and labor starts with frustration, and frustration is living in the house with you. Their house, if you can call it that, is miserable. Branches, hides, rough walls, a roof that leaks just enough to keep things interesting. Smoke gathers under the top because ventilation has not yet been perfected or even attempted with confidence. Everything smells faintly of damp earth, stale ash, and people learning domestic survival by trial, error, and mutual disappointment. Privacy is already a myth. Marriage under pressure is not romantic. Nobody is strolling through wildflowers exchanging tender glances while harp music happens somewhere tasteful. You are in a shelter where every object is too few. Every task is too many, and every silence has weight. Adam remembers what he lost. Eve remembers what she touched. They both remember hearing the voice of God in a place that did not scratch, sting, or resist. Now there is weather, real weather, cold that bites in the dark before sunrise, heat that sits on your shoulders at noon like a tax collector, wind that shoves dust into your teeth and under your clothes, rain that turns the ground outside the shelter into slick brown misery. The first family has been evicted into the sort of world where your laundry would never fully dry, even if you had laundry. And they grieve like people, not statues. That matters. You do not get two polished marble ancestors posing nobly at the edge of paradise. You get a husband and wife who cry, quarrel, cling, pray, remember, and keep waking up outside the wrong gate. The loss is not abstract. It is domestic. It is in empty hands at mealtime. It is in the ache of childbirth. It is in the way a husband looks at thorny ground and knows it did not used to be like this. Some tellings lean hard into Adam's sorrow. You are there with him when he turns back toward Eden's direction, as if looking long enough might undo the whole thing. The gate is no longer simply shut. It is guarded. Bright, terrible, impossible. No sneaking in after dark. No, perhaps if we explain ourselves. Paradise now has security. Aggressive security. You can almost feel the heat from the guarding fire even from a distance. It flashes and shifts with that unnerving liveliness. Fire has when it seems smarter than you. Adam stands there with dust on his legs and grief all over his face, and there is no argument to make. He knows the way, he just cannot use it. That is a special kind of pain. Eve's grief has a different texture. She carries the memory in her body. Hunger, desire, shame, the weight of being blamed, and also blaming herself. The later stories imagine her weeping in ways that feel raw and repetitive, the way real grief is repetitive. Not one dramatic cry, and then a tasteful fade out. More like day after day of remembering, of replaying, of wanting to speak and not wanting to hear your own voice. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. Food still has to be made. You can have all the cosmic tragedy you want. Somebody still has to scrape together supper. You gather plants that are tougher, meaner, and significantly less cooperative than the produce of Eden. Roots cling to the ground. Wild grains need processing. Nuts have shells like they were designed by an enemy. If you want flour, you grind. If you want oil, you press. If you want a fire, you pray the wood is dry enough to cooperate. The meal comes slowly, very slowly. By the time bread or something bread adjacent appears, everyone is already tired and slightly offended by the process. The dough is coarse. Grit gets in your teeth. Smoke gets in your eyes. Something burns on the edge because this is the first family, not a professional kitchen, and absolutely nobody has invented rustic charm to make kitchen disasters sound intentional. Still, they eat. That is one of the tender parts. Outside Eden, survival itself becomes a kind of devotion. Adam brings what he can from the field. Eve shapes what she can from gathered food, ground meal, and stubborn effort. They share, not because life is easy, but because there is no other way forward. You watch them hand each other the work of staying alive. It is rough love. Real love often is. Some nights Adam comes back scraped, filthy, and silent. Soil clings to his calves. His hands are split where wood or stone bit them open. He lowers himself near the fire with the sound every overworked person has made at least once, a sort of half-groan, half-surrender, as though his joints have filed a formal complaint. Eve sets food before him. Not much. Enough. No speeches, just enough. Other nights Eve is the one bent over with pain, and the old stories do not look away from it. The world outside the garden is a place where bodies bleed, swell, ache, and fail to cooperate on important days. Childbirth is not framed like a pretty painting with clean blankets and glowing serenity. It is sweat, strain, fear, blood, and the alarming realization that human life enters the world yelling. The first cry of the first child must have sounded enormous. Imagine it. No midwife with years of experience. No grandmother barking useful instructions from the corner. no stack of folded linens. Just two people, already carrying grief, trying to welcome life into a world that had gone sharp around them. Eve labors in pain, and Adam can do very little except panic, pray, fetch water, and look horrified, which, to be fair, is still recognizable male behavior across the centuries. Then the child is there, small, slick, furious. You see Eve holding him with tears still on her face, exhausted past language, and there it is, hope refusing to die. Outside the gate, under curse, among thorns, a baby is breathing. The stories linger there because they need to. Paradise is gone, but generation continues. Life does not ask permission from grief before showing up. That child changes the shelter. Every small domestic detail changes. Now there is crying at night. Now there are scraps of cloth drying badly. Now there is the smell of milk, spit up, sweat, and smoke becoming one unified household fragrance. Now there is one more mouth to feed, and one more reason to keep clawing food out of reluctant ground. Family life does not cure sorrow, but it gives sorrow chores. Soon, there is more than one child. And then family life becomes louder, dirtier, and dramatically less manageable. Children in this world are not clean little ornaments. They are dusty, hungry, loud, curious, and always half a second away from eating something they should not. Their knees are scraped, their hair is tangled, their faces shine with tears, snot, and whatever they just touched. They tumble in dirt outside a shelter made by grieving parents, and somehow still laugh. That laughter matters too, because Adam and Eve do not spend every waking moment as symbols. They become a household. He teaches sons to work the ground, and the lesson is not fun. The soil resists boys as rudely as it resists men. You can picture Adam trying to show small hands how to strike, dig, pull, gather, and endure, while inwardly knowing that this labor is inheritance now. Not land in the pleasant sense. Blisters, sweat, seasons. Waiting for crops while birds treat your field like an open buffet. Eve teaches as well. Cooking, gathering, caring for younger children, mending whatever can be mended, watching the sky, reading hunger in a child's face, measuring out food when there is not enough. She becomes the center of those tiny acts that keep a family from unraveling. A hand on a fevered forehead, a crust saved for later, water carried, a wound washed, a frightened child pulled against her chest in the dark. Outside Eden, tenderness gets practical. That may be why these later tellings love to fill the silence with domestic detail. Because after the gate closes, what then? What does regret do at breakfast? What does exile sound like when a baby will not sleep? What does repentance look like when the cooking pot needs scrubbing and the field still must be weeded? The answer in these stories is that holiness gets dragged into ordinary misery and keeps working there. Adam prays. Eve prays, not elegantly. This is not polished temple liturgy with trained singers and ideal acoustics. This is two people under a rough roof speaking into smoke and dark, sometimes kneeling, sometimes lying face down on hard ground, sometimes lifting cracked hands toward heaven because they do not know what else to do. Their prayers have dirt in them, and hunger, and shame, and memory. Some stories imagine them doing penance with startling intensity, standing in rivers, fasting for long stretches, weeping until their faces are swollen and their bodies weak. It has that ancient extreme energy people get when they cannot undo what happened, but still desperately want to do something. You can feel the ache in it. The first pair trying to answer disaster by making their grief physical. Adam goes into water, cold water, not a serene spa moment, more like standing half-submerged in a river, long enough for your teeth to chatter and your legs to go numb while you beg for mercy. The current presses at him. Mud squishes between his toes. Reeds scrape his skin. Insects do what insects do, which is remain committed to being awful regardless of theological significance. He stands there, praying, fasting, enduring. Eve does her own grieving. In some tellings, she goes to the Tigris, weeping and pleading, trying to bear the weight of what happened. You can feel her exhaustion, hair hanging loose, body worn thin, stomach gnawing with emptiness, skin chilled by water and wind. Regret has become a whole environment now. But misery rarely stays uncomplicated. Enter the adversary. Because apparently exile, childbirth, hard labor, and death entering the world were not enough administrative burden for one family. No, there must also be deception continuing outside the garden, like a scam call that somehow found you even after you changed kingdoms. The enemy shows up again in these stories, sly and persistent, trying to worm back into Eve's sorrow. It is infuriating, also believable. Grief makes people vulnerable. Exhaustion makes people vulnerable. Isolation makes people vulnerable. Eve out there in pain, wanting some word of relief, is exactly the sort of person a liar would target. The old expansions know this. They imagine the devil taking forms, sounding persuasive, offering fake instructions, spiritual nonsense with a smooth finish. It is the ancient version of a fraudulent email marked Urgent Mercy Update. Eve is not portrayed as cartoonishly foolish. She is tired. That lands differently. Anybody can stand firm when fed, rested, secure, and surrounded by good counsel. Try doing it hungry, ashamed, and living in a hut where every memory aches. The stories give her that human vulnerability. They also give Adam the role of grieving beside her, warning, consoling, sometimes failing to protect, sometimes simply sharing the burden because there is no shield big enough for all of it. Their marriage bears scars. You can feel that too. There are moments of blame. How could there not be? Moments when each knows exactly what the other did. Moments when love has to move through resentment without pretending resentment is not there. A lesser telling would make them either constantly venomous or instantly ideal. These expansions often do something better. They make them stay. They remain together. That is not nothing. To wake every day in the company of the one person who remembers exactly what was lost and exactly how it happened, and still share food, bed space, labor, children, grief, prayer, and old age. That is a kind of fidelity forged under brutal conditions. Eden had innocence. Exile has endurance. Then the children grow, and with growth comes the old family horror no parent is ever prepared for. Conflict. The household that began in tears now has brothers with different dispositions, different offerings, different inward weather. One works the soil. One keeps flocks. One brings produce. One brings the fat portions of animals. You can feel the tension before it snaps. Family meals getting quieter, looks exchanged, resentment thickening like badly stirred porridge. Adam and Eve have seen disaster before. This one is new anyway, because no amount of parental sorrow teaches you how to stop one son from hating another. No previous exile prepares a mother to hear that one child has risen against his brother in the field. The stories around Adam and Eve often dwell on the aftermath, because of course they do. What was life like for the first parents after the first murder? Unbearable, probably. Eve's cry over Abel's must have torn the air. Adam's grief would have been different, but no smaller. You stand in that camp, and the smell of earth is suddenly worse, because the earth has now drunk blood from this family too. The ground that was already cursed has become witness. Cain is marked by what he has done. Abel is gone. The first house outside Eden has become a house of mourning, in a way even exile did not fully prepare them for. And still they live. That is the terrible part. And the holy part. They bury, they weep, they look at Cain and see both their son and the wound in human history walking around in a body. They look at the place where Abel should be and feel emptiness settle in like a permanent tenant. They keep breathing anyway. They keep cooking, burying, planting, praying, telling children what happened, warning, remembering. 3 years pass. The smell hasn't improved. By then, the routines of exile are familiar, which is its own sadness. The shelter has been patched so many times, it looks like a disagreement held together with rope. Storage jars are chipped. Tools are worn smooth by desperate use. Everybody knows where water is fetched, where grain is ground, where skins are hung, where fires smoke worst, where wind gets in, where grief sneaks up strongest at dusk. This is home now, and that word tastes strange. Age comes for Adam too, slowly at first, then all at once. The man who once walked in freshness now creaks when he stands. His beard goes thin and wild. His back folds. His hands are knotted with a lifetime of work the garden never required. He has the look of an old farmer who can predict weather with his knees and misery with one glance at the horizon. The later stories love this aged Adam, not because he is triumphant, but because he endures long enough to become a memory bearer. He tells the children, and the children's children, about the garden, about trees and rivers and the command and the serpent and the shame and the expulsion and the mercy that did not entirely leave them. Imagine being a grandchild hearing this from the old man himself, while smoke drifts through the shelter and someone outside is arguing with a goat. You were not always meant for this, he says in effect. The thorns are not original, neither is death. That would stay with you. At some point, Adam falls ill, not just old, failing. The stories linger over this because death has to arrive somewhere first in a household way, not as a concept, as a bed mat, as weakness, as sons and daughters gathered, as Eve watching the man she has loved through disaster, finally sinking toward the thing they were warned about long ago. You can feel the fear in the room, the first family now meeting the first death from the inside. The shelter is quiet, too quiet. Even children know this silence. It is the kind where people whisper without deciding to. Adam's breathing is shallow. The air smells of oil, old wool, sickness and dust. Eve sits near him with that fixed attention worn by people who know every breath might be one of the last. Her face is lined now. Her hands are rough. She has outlived innocence, youth, and one son already. Now she may lose her companion too. Some versions send Seth and Eve searching for oil of mercy, hoping for healing. That little detail is heartbreaking. They go looking for relief the way desperate families always do, clinging to any possibility, however slim. A remedy, a word, a sign, anything. You can picture them moving with urgency over familiar ground, the same rough earth their feet have known for years, while behind them, Adam waits in pain. Hope at this stage is no grand anthem. It is a grim errand. They do not get what they want in the way they want it. That feels true to the whole mood of these stories. No magical reset, no return to Eden by sundown, no cheerful loophole where death apologizes and leaves. Instead, there is promise deferred, mercy spoken for another time, healing that will not bloom in full today. Which means they must walk back to the shelter carrying words instead of cure. That is heavy in the hands. Adam dies. There is no clean way to say it. The man made from dust returns to it, and the house. Outside, Eden becomes the first death house. Wailing rises. Bodies fold over grief. Eve mourns not only a husband, but the last person who knew paradise beside her. With Adam gone, memory itself feels lonelier. The stories let that sorrow spread. They do not rush to comfort. They let the family sit in the raw fact of mortality. And then comes burial. You prepare a body. Wash what can be washed. Wrap what can be wrapped. Touch skin gone still. Feel the strangeness of familiar features emptied of breath. The first generation learns funerary care by doing it to the first man. Soil clings to everyone's feet. Tears leave tracks down dusty faces. The grave is dug in the same ground Adam fought all his life, which is bleak enough to make even the angels wince. Eve does not last forever either. Of course she doesn't. She who tasted first, bore first, wept first, and watched too much eventually follows. The later legends often surround her with children and remembrance. By then, she is no longer merely the woman of the fruit. She is mother, laborer, mourner, survivor, keeper of stories, and the tired heart of a family that learned how to live under loss. That complexity matters, because outside Eden they became more human, not less. Less innocent, certainly, less sheltered, less at ease, but more recognizably like all the people who come after them, trying to hold marriages together under pressure, trying to feed children in a hard world, trying to pray while ashamed, trying to grieve without collapsing, trying to hope without evidence strong enough to impress the neighbors. Tiny acts of devotion, tiny acts of mercy, bread shared, bodies buried, names remembered. The scroll lingers there because that is where most people live. Not in blazing visions, not in giant wars, not in heavenly weather storage. In a household after the catastrophe, with smoke in the rafters and sore hands at dusk. You sit with that for a while. You smell the fire going low. Hear someone shift on the mat beside you. Outside, the night air moves over stone and packed earth. Inside the story, Eden is still shut, still bright somewhere behind memory. But outside its wall, a family learned to plant, cook, bury, repent, love, and endure. Not beautifully, not neatly, but stubbornly. And that stubbornness lasted. Children learned names. Fields were scratched into usefulness. Prayers rose from bad shelters. Tears dried into salt on working faces. The taste of loss never fully left, but neither did the impulse to reach for mercy with dirty hands. Long after the gate burned at their backs, Adam and Eve endured, and somewhere beyond the thorns, the promise endured with them. The strange monsters and marching patriarchs recede, and what remains is a softer sound. Somebody is still singing. Not well, necessarily. You are still in the lamplit room, knees stiff on the woven mat, smoke needling your eyes, when the reader reaches for another roll and his whole posture changes. Less battlefield herald, less heavenly tour guide, more tired cantor after a long feast, clearing his throat and saying, in effect, "All right, now for the songs people kept anyway." You hear parchment crackle, that dry, papery complaint of old skin and old words. The room itself seems smaller now, intimate. The kind of smalls where you can hear a neighbor swallowing, hear somebody's sleeve drag over the floor, hear a child in the back trying very hard not to fall asleep, face first, into his own father's lap. The loud stories have passed. What remains are scraps, prayers, extra psalms, lonely lines that survived like embers in ash. And now we arrive at the side room. Not the great public performance, not the temple choir in full polished glory, everyone in matching linen and very serious about rhythm. This feels more like hearing someone hum while sweeping than realizing the tune is older than your grandfather. It is what gets sung after the officials go home, what gets whispered by people who are not famous enough to have archivists. You can almost smell the side room before you enter it. Dust, ink, wool, olive oil, old leather, a little mildew at the corner where damp got there first. Hands have touched these scraps for years. Sweaty hands, calloused hands, hands that milked goats, buried children, counted grain, and still, somehow, found enough strength at dusk to smooth a wrinkled sheet and write one more plea toward heaven. That matters at once. Because these are not celebrity prayers. Nobody is promising these lines a future in gold lettering. Nobody is standing there saying, "Excellent work. This one will absolutely be recited by generations." A man writes because his heart is full. A woman prays because exile is long. A scribe copies because he cannot bear to let a good line die. That is how some of these voices hang on. You shift on the mat. Your legs have gone numb. Somewhere near the door, another lamp is trimmed, and fresh oil throws up that warm, greasy smell, the scent of every ancient late-night reading session that ever ran longer than the spine preferred. The reader begins, and it is not thunder. It is not sword clash. It is a voice speaking toward God from the middle of ordinary suffering, which is somehow quieter and more piercing at the same time. You are no longer in giant country. You are with singers, or former singers, or people who would laugh bitterly at the word singer, because right now they are just trying to keep children fed in a foreign land where the water tastes wrong and the local bread has the texture of punishment. Someone asks for a song, maybe mockingly, maybe nostalgically, maybe with that infuriating cheerfulness people use when requesting music from the visibly miserable. Sing us one. Oh, perfect. Because nothing says comfort like being a displaced person and having strangers request your sacred playlist for entertainment. You feel the scene gather around you, a riverbank in exile, mud at the edges, reeds shaking in the breeze, garments crusted with travel dust and old sweat, harps hung up because touching them hurts, not physically. Worse, memory hurts. The kind that gets in your throat and sits there like a stone. You stand among them. The sky is pale and pitiless. Children are playing in the silt with the resilience of children who can make a game out of almost anything, while adults stare at water and think about another city, another hill, another way the air used to smell at festival time. Somebody asks for Zion's songs. You can feel the offense of it, like asking a widow to recreate her wedding dance because everyone's in the mood for something traditional. No one reaches eagerly for the strings. How could they? The instrument hangs there from a branch, wood catching the light, gut strings silent, as if even the harp itself has decided it will not perform under these conditions. You know that's stubbornness. Some griefs refuse to be made decorative. Some songs can only be sung at home, and home is now a memory with walls knocked down. Still, the words keep forming. That is the odd comfort here. Even when they cannot sing, they speak. Even when they cannot perform, they pray. Exile does not stop language. It roughens it. A prayer from home has one flavor. A prayer from captivity tastes of tears, grit, and the particular humiliation of remembering what worship sounded like before your conquerors turned it into a novelty request. You can hear somebody mutter one line under his breath, then another. Not for them, for God. That is the turn. These forgotten voices keep doing that. They redirect the whole moment upward. Not because life is tidy, absolutely not. The river smells of mud, fish, and damp reeds beginning to rot at the edges. Mosquitoes are making their usual case for final judgment. The camp behind you smells like unwashed blankets, lentil mash, smoke, and too many bodies trying to survive together without privacy. But out of this, somebody still says, "Blessed be the one who hears." It is stubborn worship. The best kind, frankly. You move from one fragment to another and keep finding the same texture. Not polished triumph, persistence, a little scrap of praise copied in the margin. A prayer for deliverance tucked beside a known song like a note slipped under a door. A psalm with the same old bones of lament and trust, but wearing a slightly different cloak, speaking from a different ache in a different room. And rooms matter. You can tell where some of these songs belong by their smell alone. Temple songs smell of animals, incense, ash, and crowds pressed shoulder to shoulder in sacred traffic. Pilgrim songs smell like road dust, figs in a bag, sore feet, and that one family up ahead whose donkey has chosen violence. But these side room songs, these often smell like lamp smoke in a private house, like damp stone, like storage jars, like wrinkled parchment pulled out after everyone else has gone to bed. You are in one of those houses now. Low ceiling, cracked plaster, a mat rolled in the corner, one cup chipped at the lip, a table that wobbles because ancient furniture was apparently assembled under active resentment. The lamp gives off enough light to see the page and not much more. Outside, a dog barks. Inside, a scribe bends over the parchment, lips moving as he writes. He is humming, very quietly. Not because he is in a musical montage, because that is how memory works. The line wants to be heard as well as seen. He writes a prayer he learned from an old man who learned it from a woman who used to say it while kneading dough. And now, there it is again, crossing into ink. Nobody applauds. Nobody markets it. The line just survives. His tools are miserable. Reed pen. Ink thick enough to clot if neglected. A page that has already been scraped and reused because parchment is expensive and sheep do not simply volunteer for literary projects. You watch him smooth a crease with the heel of his hand. His fingers are stained black-brown. One nail is split. There is probably a cramp running up his wrist that feels like divine commentary on the entire profession. He keeps going. Of course he does. This is what forgotten devotion looks like half the time. Not ecstasy, tendon pain, squinting, recopying because your first stroke bled, blowing gently on the ink, holding the page at an angle toward the lamp to catch the letters. It is the ancient equivalent of staying up late to save one file because you know if you lose it, something precious will vanish. Sometimes the extra voice is a psalm, sometimes a blessing, sometimes a prayer for mercy, so personal you feel like you should avert your eyes and yet cannot, because the whole point is that human need keeps pouring into words. One asks for rescue from enemies. One asks for remembrance. One just heaps up praise with almost childlike joy, as if the writer walked outside, saw the sky, remembered God made all this, and could not shut up about it. Those brighter songs arrive like fresh water. Not every forgotten prayer is miserable. Some ring with delight. You can hear someone praising the Creator with that full-body gladness people get when they have just escaped disaster or simply woken to a beautiful morning before the neighbor's rooster started his demonic freelancing. The heavens are praised, the stars are named, the sea gets mentioned, mountains appear, birds, beasts, weather, all drafted into one enormous choir. And suddenly you are outside, night air cool on your face. The roof under you still holds the day's heat in patches, but the wind is beginning to move across the town, bringing dust, distant cooking fires, and the smell of animals settling in for the night. A singer stands there alone, looking up. No audience but God and a few people trying to sleep on nearby roofs while pretending not to eavesdrop. He lifts his hands and starts blessing the maker of lights. The stars are absurdly bright. Of course they are. No city glare, no humming power lines, just the whole black bowl of heaven spilled with light so sharp it almost feels cold. You know why people kept writing songs in a world like this. One long look upward and the words start arriving whether you asked for them or not. Praise is sometimes just astonishment with better posture. The singer's voice is not perfect. It cracks a little on the higher notes. There is dust in his throat. He coughed earlier and tried to hide it. His sandals are worn thin. His tunic smells faintly of labor because he was not born into leisure, and neither was anybody he knows. Still he sings as if heaven is worth the inconvenience of breath. And there is something deeply moving about that. Then the scene shifts again, because these forgotten voices are scattered like seeds in the wind. Now you are in a desert place with a solitary worshipper, maybe a traveler, maybe a fugitive, maybe a community leader having a very bad season and trying not to say so too directly. The sun has gone down, but the rocks still radiate that stored heat through your souls. Your mouth is dry enough to make swallowing feel personal. The prayer that rises here sounds thirsty, even before the actual thirst is mentioned. You know that kind of prayer. Body first, theology later. The lips crack. The tongue feels thick. Sweat dries into salt at the neck. Sand finds every fold of cloth and every crease of skin with the persistence of an unpaid intern desperate to impress. Out of this delightful environment comes longing for God, cast in the language of bodily hunger and thirst. Of course it does. Ancient spirituality is rarely abstract when your daily life includes dehydration. These singers use what they have: bread, water, shadow, enemies, sleep, bones, tears, oil. Nothing fancy. No polished dissertation. Just the furniture of ordinary life turned toward heaven. A man says his soul thirsts because his actual mouth is dry. A woman says she lies awake because she has, in fact, been awake for hours listening to wind rattle the shutters and wondering whether tomorrow will bring debt, sickness, or a messenger nobody wants. Prayer borrows its metaphors from the pantry and the bedroom and the road. That is why it lands. You can smell the bedroom too. Wool blanket, human breath, clay wall holding yesterday's warmth, maybe a baby nearby making those tiny snuffling sounds that are equal parts adorable and alarming. Maybe an older relative coughing in the next room. Maybe mice in the storage corner conducting themselves with the confidence of tax officials. In that dark, someone whispers a prayer no choir will ever learn, and still it matters. Some of these old extra songs feel like exactly that. Night prayers, the sort uttered by people who are too tired to decorate their speech. Guard me, hear me, help me, remember me, do not leave me here. Short lines, plain words, the spiritual equivalent of gripping a blanket edge and saying, I cannot do another surprise catastrophe this week. You move through blessing after blessing, lament after lament. The effect is oddly tender. Because by now you have seen heaven's storage rooms, giant footprints, ancient family disasters, and enough cosmic administration to make a tax office blush. After all of that, these smaller voices feel almost domestic. They return worship to the scale of one throat in one room, one person on one mat, one little lamp, one wrinkled page, one fragile body insisting on speaking to God again. There are extra psalm traditions tied to David too. Of course there are. Because once a community gets used to David writing songs, every old line with enough poetry and enough royal dust on it starts drifting toward his name like burrs on wool. You can feel the atmosphere around those songs. A king once fled, a king once hid, a king once praised, a king once looked over hills and thought of shepherd days and battle days, and his own bad decisions chasing him like hounds. You are with him for one of those side songs now, not in the throne room, in the aftermath, a rough place, stones underfoot, dry weeds scraping your ankles. The smell of sheep may be still lingering in memory, though now he is long past being just a shepherd boy and knows too much, has done too much, carries too many names. There is relief in his prayer, and embarrassment too, because rescue has come yet again, and he knows perfectly well he remains a complicated man receiving mercy. Those are often the best prayers, not the clean ones, the ones with dirt under the fingernails and a little awe that God has not finally said, enough, absolutely enough, I am muting this conversation. Instead, mercy keeps arriving, and so another psalm gets sung, maybe in camp, maybe on a hillside, maybe with soldiers nearby pretending not to be emotional while listening. Ancient, tough men loved a heartfelt song more than they would ever admit. The instruments join in, lyre, harp, hand drum, possibly a flute somewhere doing its best, possibly badly. Ancient ensembles were not always giving conservatory excellence. Sometimes they were giving heartfelt community effort with a strong percussion bias. You can hear strings buzz, fingers pluck, someone miss an entrance, someone recover valiantly, and over it all the words rise anyway. Praise has survived worse than imperfect tempo. Then you get another kind of forgotten voice. A prayer attached to a name most people do not remember. A king from one generation or another, brought low by trouble, chained, sick, humiliated, cornered, or merely very aware that his sins have finally matured into consequences with shoes on. He prays from the pit of that awareness, not gracefully, desperately. And his words are kept because desperation is portable. Other people hear them and think, yes, that is exactly how guilt tastes. It tastes metallic, like fear in the mouth, like waking before dawn with your jaw clenched so hard your teeth hurt, like remembering what you did and feeling your stomach drop before your feet even hit the floor. In one chamber or another, some ruler kneels on stone, wrists sore from restraint or age, and asks for mercy with the voice of a man who has run out of strategic options. Those prayers survive because people in every century know that tone. Not all forgotten worship comes from kings. Thank God. You would lose half the soul of the whole collection if only the famous got to sing. No, you also hear ordinary communal blessings, bits of liturgy used in gatherings too small or too strange to become central. A blessing before meals, a blessing after deliverance, a chant for festivals in places where the main sanctuary is far away and travel is expensive and somebody's aunt is sick and the roads are full of bandits anyway. So people worship where they are. That is one of the comforting parts. In a village courtyard, in a house, under open sky, near a river in a foreign land, around a table with onions, coarse bread, and maybe some olives if the season has not betrayed everyone. Voices gather, some strong, some nasal, some determinedly enthusiastic, despite having no business tackling melody. Children imitate. Elders lead. Somebody forgets a line and someone else supplies it from memory. The prayer lives because a community carries it in the mouth, not in prestige. That makes the room around you feel warmer. You can almost see old women mouthing the words before the reader does. They know this line. Maybe not from any official collection. Maybe from grandmother to mother to daughter, from teacher to student, from one evening gathering to the next. Devotion often travels by repetition before it ever reaches ink. First breath, then memory, then page. And the pages themselves are a whole ordeal. You have to love these scraps precisely because they are so vulnerable. Edges nibbled, corners blackened, holes where damp, insects, or simple bad luck took their share. Ink faded to the color of old bruises. Letters smudged by fingers that were probably not as clean as anyone would prefer. A manuscript can smell like cave dust, leather, mold, and bat disappointment all at once. Yet there it is, still carrying a line of praise across centuries. You hold one carefully, or rather, you watch someone else hold it because your hands have not been approved for archival work. The reader lifts a fragment with the tenderness usually reserved for newborns and very expensive ceramics. He squints, tilts it toward the lamp, finds the letters. And from this ragged thing comes a voice clear enough to cross the room. Bless the Lord, remember mercy, sing to the name, do not forget. It is almost ridiculous how much comfort can survive on so little material. A few lines can carry a world. You feel that more strongly the deeper into these forgotten songs you go. One prayer recalls deliverance from death. Another asks to be gathered from among the nations. Another overflows with praise for creation's order. Another is deeply personal, almost embarrassingly direct, the sort of prayer that sounds like someone pacing in a courtyard at midnight with a shawl around the shoulders and no solutions in sight. Together, they make a kind of unofficial choir. Nobody invited them, center stage. They showed up anyway. That is probably why they are so easy to love. There is less grandeur here, but more proximity. You are close enough to hear a voice catch, close enough to picture the room where the line was first spoken, close enough to feel that faith was never only the property of grand ceremonies. It also lived in side spaces, in copied scraps, in remembered refrains, in people who kept addressing God without any guarantee posterity would care. At some point, the reader gives you a prayer from exile again, because exile keeps coming back. That is the thing with human history. We keep inventing fresh disasters, but homesickness remains stubbornly recognizable. The singer remembers Jerusalem or some other beloved place with painful precision. The stones, the gates, the sound of worship at feast time, the smell of baking bread in familiar alleys, the whole package. Memory makes everything sharper and crueler. Even the wind feels different in exile. You notice that. At home, wind carries your own dust, your own harvest, your own neighbor's cooking. In a foreign land, it carries somebody else's language, somebody else's spices, somebody else's jokes from across the street. None of it is evil. None of it is yours. The prayer that rises there has longing tucked into every line. Not theatrical longing, the low, chronic kind. Homesickness as background ache. And still there is trust. Not always cheerful trust. Sometimes trust with swollen eyes. Trust after weeping. Trust while sitting on luggage. Trust while trying to explain your customs to children born far from the place you love. But the voice keeps circling back. The Holy One still hears. The Holy One still remembers. The Holy One is not trapped in one city just because your heart is. You can feel why that song was necessary, especially after all the previous scrolls. You have gone from giant panic to heavenly architecture, to Eden's aftermath. And now this cluster of prayers gathers all the scattered pieces of human response and lays them quietly before God. Fear, joy, guilt, homesickness, gratitude, exhaustion, hope, no fireworks. Just words spoken faithfully over and over until they become a shelter of their own. The room where you are listening has gone very still. The lamps burn lower. Their smoke hangs in little grey ribbons under the ceiling. Someone nearby rubs sleep from one eye. Someone else has stopped fidgeting entirely. Even the child in the back is awake again, perhaps because a soft song reaches places a giant never could. You hear the reader's voice slow slightly on the final lines of one extra psalm, as if he too does not want to break the mood by moving too quickly. He sets that fragment down, takes up another, a prayer of blessing this time. Food, maybe, or rising, lying down, waking, keeping. Very simple, almost suspiciously. Simple after all the cosmic weirdness of the earlier hours. Yet when it lands in the room, everyone understands it at once. You bless God for bread because bread is not automatic. You bless God for sleep because sleep is not guaranteed. You bless God for waking because many have not. Ancient people know exactly how fragile life is. They are not under illusions. They have buried too many relatives, endured too many raids, seen too many fevers turn a house into a place of whispering and wet cloths. Their prayers are not naive. When they give thanks for shelter, it is because roofs leak. When they bless the giver of food, it is because crops fail, locusts arrive, mildew spreads, and grain stores attract creatures that were clearly created on a dare. So even gratitude has depth. It costs something. And that may be why these forgotten voices feel so companionable. They do not need fame to be true. They do not need official status to be beautiful. They are the prayers people say, because life is hard, God is still God, and silence would be worse. A side room song can hold as much faith as a temple anthem, sometimes more. You look around the room one last time, faces in amber light, creased foreheads, half-closed eyes, hands resting on knees, on mats, on the edges of old garments. The scrolls beside the reader are no longer just curiosities. They feel like the overflow of generations who refuse to stop speaking to heaven. Not because somebody promised inclusion, because praise, lament, and hope kept rising like breath in winter. Outside, the night has deepened. Somewhere, a dog barks once and gives up. The air beyond the doorway smells cooler now, with stone, dust, and a faint trace of extinguished cook fires. Inside, one final line is read aloud, and it settles over the room like a blanket patched from many hands. In sorrow, in exile, in gratitude, in the dark, people kept writing to God, and the words endured until morning. After the giant footprints, the angelic schedules, the smoky songs, and the sorrow outside Eden, you sit there on the mat and feel the questions settle in anyway. What were these storytellers pressing into your hands? Because none of this survived just to be weird. Though, to be fair, it is extremely weird. You do not spend generations copying stories about heavenly calendars, oversized chaos children, exhausted exiles, and sorrowful first parents, unless you think those stories are carrying something worth keeping. Even when the parchment is brittle, the ink is fading, and the storage conditions are basically cave plus hope, people keep passing them on. That usually means the message got under their skin. First comes Jubilees, with all its sacred scheduling and cosmic timekeeping that makes your own missed appointments look adorable. That world wanted you to feel that time matters. Not vaguely, not in the inspirational calendar sense, in the deeply annoying sense. Days matter, seasons matter, Sabbaths matter. The order of life matters. The people who loved that book looked at a chaotic world full of bad decisions, family disasters, wandering, hunger, sweat, and goats, doing something disgusting in the corner, and they still insisted that none of it was random. Heaven had not misplaced the calendar. That is comforting. Also a little oppressive, mostly comforting. It means history is not just one long trudge through dust while everyone improvises badly. It means the world has shape. It means your little life, with its meals and work and waiting and grief, is happening inside an order bigger than you. Not always an order you understand, certainly not an order you control, but an order all the same. Then Jasher hits you, where every family gathering feels one insult away from becoming a blood feud. That scroll keeps pressing one thing into you. Choices ripple. Nobody is isolated in those stories. One decision in a tent becomes trouble in a camp, then a tribe, then a generation. One act of courage echoes. One act of jealousy echoes. One lie walks around in your grandchildren's shoes. You can feel the storytellers refusing the fantasy that anything stays small forever, which, frankly, is rude but accurate. They are telling you that human actions have reach. The brave thing reaches, the petty thing reaches, the merciful thing reaches, the ugly thing absolutely reaches. Families carry what people do, for good and for disaster. That is why those stories feel so loud. Everybody is living inside somebody else's yesterday. Then the giants arrive, and what a terrible neighborhood that was. Those stories do not bother being subtle. Rebellion there is not cute, not stylish, not breaking boundaries in the way people say right before ruining dinner. Rebellion deforms. That is the point. It grows misshapen. It gets huge and hungry and unnatural. It tramples fields, terrifies villages, and turns the world into a place where even the monsters look worried. That is what those storytellers wanted remembered. Evil does not stay elegant. It becomes grotesque. It distorts what should have had proper form and proportion. What began as defiance ends as ruin, and even the powerful find themselves unable to live inside what they have made. By the time those giant beings are stumbling around in dread, the message has become hard to miss. Rebellion promises glory and delivers a horror show with structural damage. Then the path lifts into Enoch's corridors, where stars apparently keep better records than most human governments. There the feeling sharpens again. Heaven sees. That is not presented as a soft watercolor reassurance. It is bigger than that. Colder, cleaner, more immense. Storehouses, watchers, chambers, appointed movements, restrained powers, fixed boundaries. You walk through that world and come away with the sense that the universe is not unattended. Somebody is minding the lights. Somebody knows where the winds go. Somebody has not lost track of what happens below, even when below is a complete mess. That matters because Earth often looks unmanaged. It looks like confusion won. It looks like the cruel prosper, the faithful wait, and everyone's sandals are wearing out at different rates. But those heavenly journeys keep pressing the same comfort into your hands. Nothing is unseen. The suffering, the violence, the corruption, the secret rot, the stubborn faithfulness in small places, none of it slips out the back door of creation unnoticed. Then you are back with Adam and Eve outside the garden, and the whole thing gets painfully ordinary. Hungry, ordinary. Weeping, ordinary. Marriage under pressure, ordinary. And that is exactly why it lands so hard. Those stories wanted to sit with what happens after disaster, not just the moment of exile. After. When the adrenaline is gone and life becomes thistles, childbirth, regret, burial, memory, and trying to build tenderness in a place that no longer feels easy. Paradise is behind you. The ground is hard in front of you. That is where most people actually live. So what settles over you there is not the idea that suffering ends quickly. It doesn't. The lesson is that life continues outside Eden. Love continues there. Work continues there. Grief continues there. Hope, stubborn little thing that it is, continues there too. The first family becomes every family trying to make a home east of what was lost. And that is a deeply human comfort. You do not have to be in paradise for your life to still matter. Then the songs come in. And after giants and heavenly prisons and all that cosmic administrative chaos, a tired prayer from a side room lands with unusual force. Because the forgotten singers carry the simplest and perhaps the most durable truth of the whole night. People keep reaching for God anyway. That is the thread pulling through all of it. They reach in order, they reach in family chaos, they reach under judgment, they reach in exile, they reach with dust on their feet, smoke in their eyes, grief in their chest, and about 3 spoonfuls of energy left. Famous people do it. Nobodies do it. Kings do it badly. Exiles do it weeping. Scribes do it with cramped hands and cheap ink. Worship does not stop because circumstances become inconvenient. If anything, it gets more honest. And maybe that is the great comfort tucked into all these edge books and extra voices. Sacred life was never only the polished public version. It was also people trying to understand time because they feared chaos. People warning that violence mutates the world. People insisting heaven still watches. People mourning what was lost. People making prayers out of hunger, fear, gratitude, and homesickness. In other words, the same raw material human beings are still made of. So when you step back from the whole collection, the message settles into place. Time matters, so live like your days belong somewhere. Choices ripple, so what you do in the dark or the kitchen or the field is not nothing. Rebellion deforms, so do not be fooled by its first glamorous sales pitch. Heaven sees, so injustice and faithfulness alike are never lost. Suffering continues outside paradise, so pain is not proof that the story has ended. And people keep reaching for God anyway, which means the reaching itself matters more than prestige, certainty, or perfect circumstances. That is the closure these old storytellers hand to you across the smoke and years. Not a neat life, not an easy one, certainly not a deodorized one, a meaningful one, dusty, painful, still held together. A world where history is held, where choices carry weight, where evil has limits, where sorrow is survivable, and where prayer can still rise from a smoky room, a riverbank in exile, a rocky field, a ruined heart, or a house with cracked plaster and a table that wobbles like it's offended by being furniture. By the end of a night like this, that is what remains. Not just the strangeness, though the strangeness is doing a lot. What remains is the sense that generations before you lived through confusion, loss, guilt, wonder, and waiting. And they kept trying to put it all in God's direction. They counted days. They warned their children. They imagined heaven paying attention. They sang after disasters. They wrote prayers nobody promised to preserve. And somehow, across smoke, caves, scraps, and centuries, those voices still reached the room. That is what they wanted remembered. That the world is bigger than your fear, your pain is not invisible, your choices are not weightless, and your prayer does not need fame to be real. After all the dust and thunder and lamp smoke, that is the quiet thing left in your hands, and it is enough. And now the room grows quieter, the last scroll is tied shut, and the stories that almost vanished settle beside you in the dark. You hear the cord pulled tight around old parchment, a dry little scrape like brittle grass rubbed between fingers. One bundle, then another. The man near the lamp presses them flat with both hands, careful and tired, like somebody tucking in difficult children who refuse to sleep unless arranged exactly right. The oil flame leans, shivers, steadies. Nobody speaks for a moment. That silence has texture, dust in it, smoke in it, a faint animal smell drifting through the wall from the courtyard, where something with hooves is shifting its weight and probably producing fresh reasons to avoid going barefoot. Your knees are stiff on the woven mat. Your shoulders have that dull ache that comes from sitting still too long while your mind walks through centuries. The room is smaller now. Not actually smaller. It just feels that way after giants, heavens, exile, and grief. 4 mud-plastered walls, low ceiling darkened by years of smoke, a lamp, a basket, a cracked cup, a shelf that looks one irritated nudge away from becoming kindling. After all the cosmic corridors and monsters with existential problems, it is almost funny that everything ends here, in a room that smells like olive oil, old wool, and yesterday's breath. Almost funny. The scrolls rest in a stack by the wall, each one tied and quiet. That is the strange part. They are quiet now. A little while ago, they were full of alarms. Angels keeping records. Families exploding over insults. Giant beings stomping around like the world's worst upstairs neighbors. First parents weeping into the dirt. Singers praying through hunger and homesickness. Now they are only rolled skin and ink, sleeping in the corner beside a jar with a chipped lip. This is how words survive. Not in golden beams from heaven, not with a soundtrack. usually with smoke stains, cramped handwriting, and storage conditions that can only be described as aggressively hopeful. A shelf, a niche in a wall, a chest with a bad lid, a cave if things get desperate, which they often do. You wrap the scroll, tuck it away, and trust that somebody later will care enough to untie it. Somebody usually does. Outside, night has settled fully over the roofs. You can almost map the village by sound alone. A cough from one house, a baby starting up in another, distant voices going low and then lower, sandals scuffing past the lane, a dog barking at absolutely nothing, or perhaps at one of the many real things ancient dogs had every right to bark at. Somewhere farther off, a gate thumps shut. The world is winding down. Inside, the lamp is doing that end of evening thing where it burns as if personally offended by the amount of work demanded of it. The flame shrinks, flares, shrinks again. The shadows on the walls soften, and the room begins to blur at the edges. A hand reaches out and nudges one scroll farther from the soot. Even now, someone is protecting it. Not because it made the grand official shelf in every place, not because every community would agree on every line, just because it mattered to somebody. That is enough to carry a thing a very long way. You can picture the chain without anyone needing to announce it. A reader in one century smoothing the curl from an old page. A teacher in another repeating a line from memory because the copy is gone. A mother humming a prayer while kneading coarse dough that sticks under her nails. A traveler mentioning a story heard somewhere dry and far away. A preacher borrowing an image that stayed lodged in his chest. A scribe in a side room muttering each word as he writes, pausing to flex a cramping hand, then continuing anyway. The grand monuments get all the attention. Meanwhile, endurance is happening in corners, in caves, in poor light, in communities with patched clothes and tired eyes, in places where parchment is expensive, shelves are few, and mice have opinions about literature. The famous books survive there. The almost forgotten ones do too, sometimes in scraps, sometimes in echoes, sometimes in a single name on an old list that makes somebody pause and say, "Wait, I know that one." And for a moment, the voice returns. Not whole, perhaps. Not polished, but enough. Enough for the old story to lift its head again. Enough for the lost song to hum under somebody's breath. Enough for a broken fragment to carry the shape of a world. You do not always get the complete scroll. Sometimes you get 4 lines, a torn edge, and an infuriating gap, right where the interesting part should be. Ancient preservation can feel like the world's least helpful group project. Still, something made it through. A name survived. A warning survived. A prayer survived. The memory that there were once more voices in the rooms survived. And once you know that, the silence of history is no longer empty. It is crowded. Whole generations just beyond hearing, still passing things hand to hand. The man by the lamp leans back at last. His face is tired in the way only lamplight can emphasize, every line turned soft and gold around the edges. He looks at the shelf, then at the tied bundles, then at nothing in particular. Maybe he is thinking of all the pieces no one has time to copy. Maybe he is thinking of words lost already to damp, fire, war, neglect, or simple human chaos. A spilled jar, a collapsed roof, a grandson who had no idea what that old roll was and used the shelf space for tools. History is full of extremely preventable disasters. And yet the stories endure. Not all of them in full, not all of them everywhere. but enough endure to prove how stubborn memory can be when people decide something is worth repeating. A line gets quoted, a prayer gets reused, a strange image lodges itself in communal imagination and refuses to leave. Giants still stride through thought long after their scrolls splinter. Enoch still walks heavenly corridors in the minds of people who never saw the whole book. Adam and Eve still grieve east of Eden in expanded sorrows. The extra psalms still whisper from side rooms. The edges hold. You shift a little on the mat, and the woven reeds creak under you. The air has cooled. The smell of warmed oil is fainter now, and the smoke has thinned enough that you can detect the clay of the walls, the dry fiber of baskets, the mineral scent of dust settling for the night. The room has done all it can do. It gave you its lamp, its stories, its smoke, its long memory. Now it simply keeps watch. The tied scrolls do not look impressive. That matters too. No jeweled covers, no thunder, no angel hovering nearby to certify importance. Just rolled skins, dark ink, frayed cords, and the stubborn human habit of saving what once stirred the heart. Some of these voices lived at the edge of the shelf, the edge of the canon, the edge of communal memory. Still they were carried. Still they were repeated. Still they rested in caves and cupboards and minds, waiting for another hand. You can feel the weight of that without touching them. So much of faith has always survived like this, not as one perfect library, untouched by weather and argument, but as remembered words moving through imperfect people. People who get tired, people who misplace things, people who flee quickly and pack badly, people who sing anyway, people who copy carefully while the lamp smokes in their eyes, people who cannot keep everything but cannot bear to lose everything either. So they keep a fragment. Then another generation keeps the fragment of the fragment, and another repeats the line that remained. Outside, the village is nearly still now. Even the animals have settled into occasional snorts and restless hoof shifts. The darkness beyond. The doorway looks thick enough to lean against. Overhead, unseen stars hold their places. Down here, the shelf holds its own small constellation, tied scrolls, stacked close, waiting in the hush. Morning will come. Of course, somebody will wake sore, somebody will fetch water, somebody will curse softly at a stubborn goat. Bread will have to be made, floors swept, ashes emptied. Ordinary life will resume with its usual commitment to inconvenience. But for this moment, the room remains full of what was spoken and then rolled closed. Not gone, just resting. And that has always been part of the wonder. Some stories blaze in the center, others endure at the edges, half hidden, smoke-scented, carried by memory and need. The lamp lowers to a small red bead. The cords around the scrolls hold fast. The room waits. And somewhere beyond the dark, in caves, in lists, in liturgy, in old quotations, in the minds of the weary and the faithful, the voices linger, quieter now, but still there. And somewhere the story continues.